Já está aí? Não, já está o texto? Como assim? A gente precisa começar.
Which one? That one there? The black one?
Yes, this computer over there. Oi.
Dos 4 debatedores, falta um, salvo engano, que é o Glauco, né?
O Glauco. Não.
Eu não conheço, me lembro. Não
O
conheço
Glauco.
pessoalmente.
Será que a gente começa sem ele? Eu acho que...
Não sei.
Deixa eu telefonar para a FINEP.
Dá uma ligada aí, porque é só quem fala. Então, os debatedores vão começar.
Tá, ele tá...
O Glauco tá, não estava confirmado? Não sei.
Tá confirmado, confirmadíssimo. Confirmadíssimo. Me ligou 10 vezes. Me ligou não sei quantas vezes, mudou de mesa 10 vezes. Deixa eu ver aqui, ó. Deixa eu só achar o telefone aqui. A Analisa tá doente.
Eu estou também.
Você também. Mas você não tá tão,
Dor de garganta.
Senta na mesa se quiser.
Mas você quer um...
Senta na mesa se quiser. Aí dá
Claro.
Reaper.
Tá, você senta na mesa. Senta no... Tem, claro. Claro que sim. Senta na mesa no lugar... Eu vou botar.
Esta é ou não é a sua cidade?
Ah, tá. Exatamente.
E agora você está na Inglaterra, né?
Sim, a Inglaterra aqui, agora Leeds.
Muita chuva lá.
Essa cidade bonita. Centro da cidade. Muitas coisas lá, café,
Fica a distância de Londres.
mais ou menos 2 horas.
Vuoi provare? Così sarebbe fantastico, non dovesse sciogliere.
Giuseppe Fontana e os jovens.
Apresentações, tudo bem, então vamos começar.
Mais ou
Tá
menos
ótimo.
no Canon.
20º andar. Ok? Vamos começar. Não, é a sala da diretoria. Não, obrigada. Ele vem, tá chegando, mas vem um pouquinho depois. Ele tá vindo, mas pra...
If you need to fill a no-show seat, count on me, okay?
Ok, thanks. Gary, Friday in my house, ok? Dinner.
Okay.
Ok?
Good.
No already. Você tá lá. Você tá lá. Tá? Tá lá. Você não quer ficar lá? Tá.
Ok, thank you. Eu preciso de um bloco de anotações. Vocês receberam? Eu não ganhei um bloco. Eu não ganhei. Eu vou perguntar ela.
Tem um bloco.
Me arruma um bloquinho, porque eu não recebi junto, não sei se vão ver junto. Dois.
can use this as a bookmark.
Thank you.
Bom,
Give me your camera, if you have one. Philip's chair.
it was Chris Freeman's chair. I think they should change the name to the Freeman chair. Who the hell is
Hello.
It was
Much better.
Keith
Freeman chair.
Pavitt and Chris Freeman had the Phillips chair.
May we start the first session? Please.
Philippe, c'est de Tabaco Seller. De Tabaco Seller.
No, I wouldn't have accepted.
Let's start.
Mediocre, no one. Who gave money? Yeah, exactly.
The first session of the day is on innovation. The official title is Knowledge, Knowledge Governance and Innovation. We have two speakers, 20 minutes, at most 25 minutes per each, and three or four commentators, I hope, four commentators afterwards. The first one will be Mariana Giovanni. Giovanni Dosa will be the first speaker. Please, Giovanni.
What I'll try to do is a bit more ambitiously go beyond innovation and try to offer you a sketch of an alternative, relatively imperialist view of how the economy holds together and how it changes. That I think can provide the foundation of an alternative thinking to the mainstream, call it neoclassical, whatever. Do we need it? Yes, I think we need it. We need also to support, say, conversation like the one we had yesterday on globalization, the virtues and limitation of markets, on institutions. We cannot continue, or at least we'll be very weak, if we continue to use as a reference, say, in a shorthand, the maximization equilibrium paradigm, and then saying, define ourselves by difference, saying we are 2 meters away from that paradigm. I think we need an alternative one. Otherwise, I mean, we keep getting as a frame of reference the zeitgeist, the spirit of the time in which you've got markets, selfish individuals, markets work well, the burden of the proof is market failure, is upon the one who has to show market failure, and not only market failure, but that the market failure is bigger than the government failure, etc. I'm tired. I'm really tired. How does one? How does one change lives?
Yeah. Okay, it's okay.
It worked?
It works.
Yeah.
But did you do that?
Yeah, okay.
No, it works.
It works.
yeah.
It works.
With a delay.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a Brazilian
Be
one.
more firm.
This technology is
Giovanni, come on.
Brazilian technology.
Well,
for the one, it's a little bit complicated.
yes, but with your help, maybe. Well, you'll see the references for those of you interested into the details. That are those. I mean, this is a Dosi proposal, and the references are Dosi at hand. In any case, I mean, to go quickly, what are the major ingredients of what I see in alternative paradigm? Well, alternative paradigm, bear with me with some abstraction, but I think we need to go through a similar level of abstraction that you went through when you did microeconomic one and macroeconomic one. Those of you who did. First, methodologically, you want to tell a dynamic story. As my friend Sid Winter says, dynamic first. That is, I mean, I don't have time to get into it. That is the contrary of 99% of the papers that you see on Learn Journal that are essentially about theorem of existence, and there is no dynamics. But I don't have time to get into the detail, maybe in the discussion. And you want to have phenomenological evidence as a discipline. That is you want to violate what we were talking about that last night. Bob Solow remarked several times that the economic discipline is to teach, the methodology is to teach people how to rape their intuition and believe in absurd constructions. I think he's right, and we should get out of that frame. I mean, well, the substantive building blocks, I think you want to have micro-foundation. You want to tell stories in which that are consistent with an understanding of what people do and why they do it. This is not a methodological individualism, not. People might do things and have consequences of what they do that are very different. Still, you want to tell a story that is micro-founded. Bounded rationality is everywhere, and is not only does not concern limitation of information, memory, and computational capabilities, but concern the very representation that agents have of the world that they're in. I mean, apart from theology and economics, in no other discipline you assume omniscience, that agents know everything. In theology and economics you do, but and the world is transparent out there. In fact, I mean, there is a major dialogue that one should start, one should build with cognitive psychology, organization theory, to understand how people evolve their representation of the world, people and collection of people, I mean organizations. You have competence gap in problem solving. I mean, problem solving in the broad sense, in the technology that they're able to master. Benjamin claims that I am unable to master even this technology. Certainly, we are not again. We are not omnipotent. This is exactly opposite to the theory. The standard theory in which you say everyone is able to master the production function. Any theory of ours has to put at the center the fact that people are limited in their problem-solving capabilities, but at the same time, they are able to learn and innovate. And in fact, one of the links between this theory and development theory has to do with the accumulation of problem-solving capabilities. Heterogeneity is everywhere. In preferences, endowment, of course, like in standard theory, but also precisely in the representation, in the representation that people hold in the problem-solving repertoire and in their learning mechanism. Putting in another way, any reasoning that is based on a representative agent, as most of macroeconomics does, is crazy. And in fact, I mean, you saw the dramatic failure of current macroeconomics, not only in predicting the time of the crisis, but in predicting the very possibility of crisis. And it's obvious. I mean, if the economy can be summarized in a representative agent, you can have only crisis when the representative agent becomes schizophrenic. He asks himself to work, and the answer to himself, no, you cannot work. He asks himself credit, and then says, no, you cannot have credit. But we are in a psychiatric world. You've got to take into account heterogeneity and the moving distribution of the characteristics of the agents. The other side of this, I mean, of broad, massive bounded rationality and heterogeneity, is the fact that there is always an innovation margin. There is the persistent emergence of novelties. Well, these agents live in an interactive environment, including markets, and markets are devices for information exchange and selection, and very imperfect ones. then a crucial issue is what are the boundaries between institutions called markets and other institutions that are not called markets. On the ground of this, what do you do when you build on this building blocks? Well, you try to explain aggregate phenomena like growth, fluctuation, size distribution of firms, etc., as emergent properties out of coming from out of equilibrium interaction among these heterogeneous agents. These processes are institutionally embedded in some institutions are called markets, but there are many other institutions that are not called markets. The long-term dynamics stem from the co-evolution between these processes of learning, competition, adaptation, and institutional change, which often occurs on a time scale that is lower than these economic processes. And then analytically, I mean, for those of you that are interested, it is interesting to study the dynamics of variables, that some of which are slow, some of which are fast, and there are formal challenges there which we don't have time to enter. Well, what call this, what I've shown you, evolutionary institutionalist theory of economic change, which I think have the same ambition as the neoclassical paradigm founded on equilibrium maximization and perfectly rational agents. Now, what has been done on that? Well, a lot of work has been done on pattern of innovation and diffusion as evolutionary processes, on innovation, diffusion, growth, and development fueled by technological change. Sorry?
No, sorry.
I mean, I think that in these domains, one has a mature alternative to standard to standard macroeconomics, and also one is able to, paraphrasing Nate Rosenberg, open up the black box of technical change and innovation. Now there is this summer a meeting in Santa Fe called Opening Up the Black Box. I mean, but the Americans, as usual, when they arrive, they rediscover the wheel without citing anyone else. I'm the only invitee of the evolutionary group. But, one has done a lot of things on industrial evolution, both on the formal side and the qualitative side. Before the complaint, Mariana Mazzucato is needed there in the list before she complains. An important piece of the microeconomics of the approach that I'm suggesting to you is the understanding of firms as bundles of capabilities, not bundles of optimal contracts, but rather, as in a first approximation, as bundles of problem-solving capabilities. And in fact, a crucial dimension of the process of development and catching up is the accumulation of corporate-level capabilities. Now, there are a lot of missing elements in the interpretation And there, there is an item that is not there, and I will mention it in a second. It came up to my mind and by looking at here. There is a sort of a too Schumpeterian view of abundance everywhere, of animal spirit, of innovation, and that the animal spirits are always good. Animal spirits might be bad, and Mariana will mention how the financial animal spirits sometimes often are really bad.
Stop talking about me.
There is often a presumption, which is again quite Schumpeterian and is wrong, that innovative efforts grow with expected profitability. This is wrong. Innovative efforts relate essentially to the perception of opportunities, and not, there is no monotonicity with profitability. There is the idea that market selection works properly. Market selection does not, I mean, all the evidence that we have is that the selective power of markets is weak, takes long time, and has got an enormous slack. Is there, but weak. If you see, for example, data on, I'm familiar with microdata on France and Italy, there is very little relation between the growth of firms and the differential efficiency of the firms themselves. More efficient firms make more money, but they don't grow much more. That means that market selection does not work. Point that we are slowly trying to tackle, and this is the missing one in that list, and I will add it, is there is very little finance yet in evolutionary models. Little financial dynamics and little relation between financial dynamic and real dynamics. The Minskian, Keynesian Minskian side. We've been trying lately. We meaning essentially our group, not the evolutionary community at large. We did something important, but still is not at the center. Even those of you familiar with evolutionary modeling, the Nelson Winter model is essentially a real model without finance inside. And this is a major drawback. There is a neglect of all Keynesian issue of demand formation and management. Again, with the exception that relate essentially to several Dorsey et al., but apart from the Dorsey et al., there is not much. If you want, one Dorsey et al. It's called Schumpeter meeting Keynes, is a Journal of Economic Dynamics and Control, 2010, in which we show that this type of microdynamics is able to generate, say, a good path, a good growth path and a bad growth path. And the selection of the path depends on Keynesian mechanism of demand formation. After all, I mean, in general, I think we need much more of Keynes and much less Schumpeter. I mean, Schumpeter, if you read the book review that Schumpeter wrote of the general theory of Keynes, you might mistake it for a writing of a Chicago fascist. It's really bad. It's really bad. And with total misunderstanding of coordination issue that there are in Keynes. It's a supply side story that Schumpeter wants to tell. We have to go well beyond that. Finally, among the missing elements or in the story that I'm proposing to you is that a lot of people talk about creative destruction, but the emphasis is always on the creative, not on the destruction. While there is a big destructive element, both in terms of social destruction, unemployment, misplacement, and environmental. Still, I think these are the building blocks that robustly support, should support, say, the type of discussion that we had yesterday. I would like, my dream would be to have this type of elements in the back of the mind when one discusses how good or bad are these institutions, how good or bad is this macro policy. I would like to to see them nested into a Weltanschauung in which you have got boundedly rational agent, market as that with out of equilibrium dynamics, etc., etc. I think that these tools are also the tools that, to put it very briefly, are the tools that would support a sort of innovation-friendly, environment-friendly, highly redistributive new Keynesianism that I think is the policy frontier everywhere to begin with in developed countries. I think only that is able to switch from the bad growth path to the good one. Well, when I say new Keynesianism, I mean new.
Third way.
So he's right. I mean, we don't want the new in the sense of real. Appellation d'origine contrôlée, something like that. Involving, all three elements are fundamental. I mean, innovation friendly. You don't dig holes and fill them up like in the old desperate Keynesian proposal. You focus a good deal of your innovative activities on environment-friendly innovation, and you have a massive redistribution of income. When I give similar talks in the US, I end with a punchline saying, but didn't you know that you had a communist president? And people look at me and say, what? And say, yes, General Eisenhower. General Eisenhower had the marginal taxation, marginal personal taxation 92%, and corporate taxation 60%. Long live Comrade Eisenhower. And they all look at me, and everyone that nowadays say, but if you tax profit, you tax investment. Not true. That was the period of highest taxation and of highest investment in the US economy. And even the micro evidence collected on the ground of the building blocks that I was showing you before shows that there is no micro correlation between profitability and rate of investment or rate of growth. Yes, I think that the bit abstract building blocks before might help in the reconstruction of a political economy that has got this progressive policy element.
Thank you, Giovanni. Now, Mariana Mazzucato, please.
Can you switch it? I have no idea why
Why for?
this.
Why what?
Leisure. Who's in Asia? The one? Okay.
Is this one?
It's
Yes.
no. That's after. Matsukato. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I have about 100 slides, so I'm not going to go through them. So every now and then, stop looking at the screen because I'm going to speed on through many, and you might get dizzy. So what I would like to do, in case I don't get through it, I'll tell you already now the punchline, even though I think this happens when you go from a Mac to non-Mac, is the numbers screw up. So the fourth one is a fourth, not a one.
Yeah.
So what I want to do, try to do, is first of all to put all this in context, which is that currently, luckily, many places in the world are rediscovering industrial policy and industrial strategy, but I think it's being misinformed because we still, unfortunately, are bringing to that discussion of industrial policy much baggage. And if I have to summarize the baggage, it's a misunderstanding of the role of the state. And I'm not sure if this community has done as much as, by this I don't mean the people in this room, I mean the broader sort of Schumpeterian, evolutionary, whatever we want to call it, our broad network of friends. I'm not sure if we've done enough on that regard. I want to specifically then focus on why I don't think we've done enough, which is I think we still assume that in the end, even though the state is absolutely important for all sorts of reasons, whether it's fixing market failures or systems failures and the systems of innovation approach, and even the developmental state stuff, in the end, the real sort of dynamism, creativity, or using Steve Jobs' words, the crazy, foolish, spirit is still in the private sector. And then what the state has to do is sort of to either nudge it or to push it or to create the conditions for that dynamism to come out. And I think that misses absolutely the creative, dynamic, potentially foolish, potentially crazy aspect of the state. And that then has implications for the capacity building within the state. I want to then focus on why this is really important concretely, on why so many policies today within industrial policy are misinformed and also in the end ineffective because they don't get that distinction. And I want to end with one of the most important potential policy distinctions, which is that once you actually recognize the state as more than just market fixer, system fixer, creator of conditions, then, and if you actually take on what it has done in almost every technological revolution, but even within revolutions, even within a sector, so whether it's clean technology today or nanotech or the internet, that it actually took on the greatest risks, the greatest Knightian uncertainty, then we really have to start asking about the risk-reward relationship, and that it's not enough to assume that the reward to the state occurs through tax. And this is not just because the companies don't pay tax. So Apple does not pay tax to the state of California, even though it got all the support it did, and I'll get to that later. But even if they pay tax, it's not enough because innovation is so inherently risky, you will often get it wrong. And instead of blaming the state for its failures, Concord or the modern day examples, we need to make sure that it is able to reap a reward that can both fund the next round of innovations. So the internet proceeds could be funding the green tech proceeds, but we didn't think this through, but also fund the failures, which are inevitable. And of course, we also need to build a state which welcomes failure instead of fears it if we want it to be engaging in this way. Okay, so I guess I'm actually done. Because I often do this when I tell jokes. I'm always worried that I'll forget the punchline, so I tell the punchline first. Okay, so I have until, it was 35, yeah? You said 25 minutes now? Is that right? Good. Okay, so the context is just one slide, which is basically what I said yesterday in my comment, which is that at least in the developed world, there's this obsession right now with rebalancing the economy away from finance for all sorts of reasons, which really we covered yesterday. And I think this is a potentially problematic way of thinking about it, because in fact, the same problems that many people say of finance, which is socialization of risk, privatization of rewards, is exactly what we see in the real economy and how innovation occurs. Okay, so I actually like that phrase because it in some ways encapsulates all sorts of problems that are wrong in the real economy. And so what we need to be careful is that instead of saying, okay, now we need to nurture our real industry, the real economy, so you have a list of different sectors, we need to really understand how screwed up these sectors have become, how financialized they have become, and how this has hurt innovation. and so it's not just about the banks, the hedge funds, the derivatives, but the pharmaceutical companies, the automotive companies, the IT companies are problematic, and so industrial policy has to first reform that. We have to get away from what I've increasingly been calling a parasitic, a predator-prey innovation ecosystem to a more symbiotic one. But by the way, in order to do that, you also have to rethink value creation and be able to distinguish it from value extraction. But the word value is something else that I think this community has to come back to. I'm not sure how long we can continue to survive without going back to asking at least what is the underlying theory of value that we share or want to construct. Because in order to distinguish Ricardian rents from Schumpeterian profits, you actually do have to talk about value. But anyway, I can't talk about that today. We wouldn't have time. So I have a bunch of slides after this, which I won't go through. I'll just use this one, which is basically that of course, we all, I think in this room, know the limits of the market failure approach. One thing you might not know, by the way, is that the amount of R&D spending that has been done in the U.S., which is often used as one of the most innovative economies, something like 75% of the R&D spending that has been done by the U.S. government, whether it was the internet or putting a man on the moon, is more mission-oriented, which cannot be explained via market failure. Market failure, as you know, is used to justify government intervention when you have a public good or externalities, and the typical example is basic research, because it's not appropriable, so private companies won't do enough of it. That does not explain, first of all these missions, again, from putting a man on the moon, which required about 20 different sectors actually to interact, but also lots of government spending on both basic and applied, but also the visionary sort of mission setting that it required cannot be explained through the market failure approach. And a very good reference on this is David Mowery's work, both in 2010 as well as his recent piece in research policy, but just take that for granted. But also, this constant thinking of the state as just fixing failures also, of course, is just as true of people like Stiglitz and Krugman, who are the sort of new Keynesians, I guess, in the new, not being really new, where the idea is that, because we have problems of not enough state investment during recessions, we need a counter-cyclical government. And this is, again, really just seeing the state as coming in and, yes? Sorry? Anyway, the state coming in and fixing problems. And I think it's curious that when Stiglitz and Krugman get accused on television, that they are not, that if you believe in counter-cyclicality, why then during the boom did you not, request that the state do less? They actually don't have an answer. They don't say, well, hold on, if the state did less, we wouldn't have the internet. All the internet funding actually happened during the boom, as did the nanotechnology funding. So the state also, as leader, not just, in the recession to get us out, but even in the boom as playing a very active, what I'll call later risk-taking role, is something that they, should be talking about when they get accused about the boom period, but they don't. I just don't think they know it. The systems failure approach, which is probably a boring way to talk about the systems of innovation approach, but I think that the problem is that if you look at so much policies around the world today, which has been influenced by the work of Chris Freeman or Lundvall and Fagerberg and all the people who've contributed to the systems approach, is really one, unfortunately still, at least how it's interpreted, is the state as creating these framework conditions. Now, so if you look at the European Union, the Innovation Nation framework is all about the state, creating things like academic and industry links, which of course are important, or fixing coordination type failures, setting up, yes, proper education, research, the basics that we need for innovation, but not the state as a really active agent taking on, setting these missions and setting these visions, which then, unfortunately, we talk about crowding in, but I want to talk about the state sort of dynamizing in the private sector. Mm-hmm. And of course, with Keynes, what's really interesting is that the word animal spirits, which he used to discuss why we have recessions, which is that, investment is too pro-cyclical, too much during booms, too little during busts, and also all the implications around financial markets and herd behavior. The word is quite unfortunate, because when you think of the word animal spirits, you really think of a lion, you think of a wolf, but in fact, so much of why you actually need the state is both in the boom and in the bust, so much of the private sector is actually quite wimpy. And there's a wonderful letter, which I have later, or you have it in the slides in front of you, which he wrote to Roosevelt, where he says, you know what, in the end, these businesses, they're actually not wolves, they're not lions, they're a bunch of domesticated animals. What just happened? What happened there?
Yes,
Did
a
it go?
pussycat.
¿Qué pasó?
The English one.
Huh?
He was looking at the English one.
Yeah, the pussies. Anyway, I don't need the slides.
No,
So,
you need.
And so what I try to do and what I put down there as the fourth view is that we really need to think of what kind of words can we actually use to describe the state as something more than that. And so I came up with this word entrepreneurial state, but of course the developmental state stuff is very much in that line as well. I think I just try to do it a bit more explicitly around the risk-taking element. But there's a wonderful book by Tony Judt, which I really recommend you read, called Ill Fares the Land. And it's basically on the fall of the welfare state.
Please, the name.
Tony Judt, if anyone's
Yeah,
interesting,
yeah.
I can write it for you later. And what he says is that the battle against the welfare state, which has of course been a long battle way before this whole crisis occurred, has been also a discursive battle. Okay, the words we use to talk about the state, and he gives an example, administration, has been part of the battle against the state. So I think part of what I'm trying to do here is a call for really to stop using the words that then, allow the market failure approach to have completely survived even all of our, battle, and to really start thinking of these things in a new way. And the way that I try to do it is think of the state as a lead risk taker. Okay, so if you look at almost every different sector, whether it is, IT, biotech, nanotech, and modern day clean technology, what really comes out is that the state has been very courageous, visionary, mission setting, and in every single sector, even within it, actually taking on the highest risks. So here, it's up here. Let me just show you what I mean. If you think of it in terms of risk space, okay, sorry, this is important, which is what I said at the beginning, which is even underlying our systems of innovation approach, this false contrast, which, yes, the public sector is absolutely important, but by its very nature, it's going to be a bit slower, a bit less, dynamic, and all the creativity, which is still in the private sector. This contrast, I think, has survived and is even within our community. I mean, I won't say the names, but within our Schumpeterian community, this false contrast survives. And so in terms of the discursive battle that I talk about, it's really this discourse here, which unfortunately we still see everywhere. Of course, the obvious places, okay, this just died. The obvious place that we see it is in The Economist, where they talk about, I think the better quote is in this Economist one, where it was a special issue dedicated just to green technology. And in the end it said, governments should stick to the basics, better schools for a skilled workforce, clear rules, level playing field for enterprises of all kind, leave the rest to the revolutionaries. So this idea that somehow the revolutionary, creative, dynamic spirit is in the private sector is what I really think has to be destroyed, because the attack on the welfare state has often been precisely by making this assumption that in order to have the Silicon Valley in Europe, we need less state, more market, and of course the work of Bloch and Keller has been fundamental for showing how much state involvement was in Silicon Valley. But the words I think we use have to completely change. This of course leads to policies where you have countries like the UK thinking it can just reduce tax and reduce red tape to have innovation. Anyway, let me speed on. This is the nice letter from Keynes talking about, they're not as wolves or tigers, but as domesticated animals by nature. So in terms of the risk space, if you think of it in terms of, I think there was a better one here, capital intensity on the vertical axis and technological and market risk on the horizontal axis, and sector by sector by sector, what you see that the upper right-hand quadrant is the one where the state investment, when it's successful, okay, so when you have a confident state, it has to have sectoral expertise and make sure that it is operating in that upper right-hand quadrant, as well as obviously all sorts of other things. But when it gets captured, because there is always that fear of capture that people talk about, is when it is actually working perhaps in the other areas when you need, the private sector to at least be doing something. But the issue is that if you actually look at it this way, a state as lead risk taker, you also notice that the risk is not just at the beginning. All throughout the innovation cycle, you have high risk. And so it was very interesting that when Romney was running against Obama, what he said is, one of the things he said, one of the foolish things he said, was that if he won, he was going to both cut national public broadcasting, yeah, so the whole big bird thing. But also, he said, I'm going to cut the applied research of ARPA-E. ARPA-E today is the equivalent of what DARPA did for the internet. They're trying to do that, in green technology, bringing in people on secondment for 5 years, telling them to be crazy. Of course, this was one of the successes of DARPA, that it actually, engaged with risk, welcomed risk, and in so doing discovered the internet. ARPA-E is trying to do that with green, and it requires both basic and applied research. It is not true that somehow the state just has to do the big science and the rest is going to be done by the private sector. In clean technology today, the private sector in much of the applied stuff is still too scared because it's still such a highly uncertain area. But of course, something else that Fred Block has done recently is showing also that SBIR funds, which are basically a form almost of public venture capital, anyway, public funding of companies, not just the technology, has actually risen over time because venture capital itself, this is something I write about in the Entrepreneurial State, has become so mythologized, right? So Europe thinks that it's weaker than the US because we don't have venture capital. So the venture capitalists have been given a golden plate and have done what I said yesterday, negotiated these amazing reductions in capital gains tax in so doing. But this has actually caused venture capital itself to become more short-termist. It was already short-termist, but today what we find is a lack of willingness of venture capital to fund the really high-risk areas of clean technology, which is, of course, even more risky than some of the IT gadgets were that it funded. And so the result is the SBIR funding, the public funding of companies, has had to rise in order to make that up. By the way, there's a small business innovation research program. It's US government money that funds so Apple, Compaq, and Intel all got early money, not from private VC, but from SBIR. The previous was SBIC. That's what Apple got. So this, again, is important because many people don't realize that they, yes, admit that the state does the basic research and they think that's all there is to it, but the companies themselves get money from the state. This is risk capital, okay? By the way, Solyndra, which have people heard of what happened with Solyndra, the big solar company? What's amazing there is that this, that's been used as another example of the state picking winners and failing, stupid state, don't get too involved, just do the basics. The reason Solyndra went bust was that when the Chinese very active solar policy caused silicon prices to fall, Solyndra found that it actually had to delay by a year its IPO, its initial public offering, and build a second plant. VC immediately got scared, the wimpy domesticated animals, and took the money away, and the whole thing went bust. Solyndra had received a $500 million guarantee from government, from Obama, and that was then used in the media, but even by many economists, as saying, oh, look, it's Obama's fault. They did not talk about the problem was impatient capital. VC is very impatient. 3 to 5 years is not going to work in an area like solar or wind or biofuels today. And this is why you need state investment banks or the equivalent of DARPA-type big public funding organizations. Anyway, other example, iPhone, everything that makes the iPhone smart, everything, okay? So internet, GPS, touchscreen display, even this new modern thing, which I always press by accident, the Siri voice-activated personal assistant, all government funded. So yes, you need Steve Jobs to come to Stanford and do his wonderful speech, be crazy, be foolish. Well, it's great to be crazy and foolish in a country that then, hands you basically all these technologies. You're not going to get very far in Europe being crazy and foolish where you don't have, this amount of massive public funding which produced the underlying technologies that the iPhone depended on. Anyway, there's all sorts of examples. People often accuse me of taking examples from the Department of Defense, but the perfect example of not Department of Defense is modern day pharma, which is wonderful because you actually have data on every single drug and you can classify the really revolutionary ones from the Me Too, slight variation ones. And Marcia Angel's work shows that 75% of the really radical drugs, which are the new molecular entities with priority rating, trace their funding, not just basic, also applied to the National Institute funding, which is public funding. With big pharma, by the way, what do they do? And this is why I talk about parasitic ecosystems, is as the NIH budget has been increasing, as you see here, $31 billion in 2012, what does big pharma do? They've been closing down their R of the R&D. They actually say this quite openly, but they say it with these euphemistic, again, think of the discursive battle, words, open innovation. We are in an open innovation system. I mean, it's a scam. And so what they are spending money on is, and there's some slides at the end, are just buying back their stock. Pfizer and Glaxo have spent more money since 2006 on buying back their own stock than on R&D. Why are their prices so high? Because they're the big risk takers. They spend so much on R&D. No, they spend a lot on the D. They spend a lot on the marketing. No one's saying they're not spending money, but they're not spending money on the really risky stuff. And the implication is bring down the prices, because if you look at how they calculate their costs, anyway, that's another story. So let me just skip ahead. You don't need more examples, I assume, here. Why this is then wrong policy-wise is so many policies from all the venture capital stuff, which is happening across Europe and across the world, is bullshit. Basically, venture capital did not do what people say it did. It came in 15 years after in biotech. Today, it is not providing real risk capital. Of course, you need a functional venture capital industry, but this assumption that the problem is just finance and supply of risk capital has made the venture capital problem become an obsession and missed the story, which is that in Silicon Valley and in biotech, they came 15 years after the state did the hard stuff. Also, the whole SME obsession, I think that's hand in hand with this, which SMEs, everyone is worried about attacking them because they're much more cuddly than things like hedge funds and even VC. But it's a problem. So in the UK, we spend $9 billion a year on SMEs, direct and indirectly. I mean, I don't know. Why not give the money to teachers? Or it's not obvious why we're doing that. They do not produce. 95% of them do not produce any net job creation. They destroy more jobs after 3 years than they create half the time, and they definitely are not the sources of innovation. 5% of them are, but that's not the whole group. And so mythologizing these particular actors in the ecosystem as opposed to really understanding each one of their roles wastes a lot of money. Then, of course, this obsession with knowledge transfer, which Dozy, who complained that I didn't cite him here, has written about. But this assumption that somehow we have great science, we just need to commercialize it, misses the point. We don't have enough research, especially in enough research institutions in Europe and across most of the globe, as the US used to have. The US, by the way, no longer has this, but the Silicon Valley model was very much based on many different universities, top level. So even UC San Francisco, this is not Harvard or even Berkeley, was doing top-level research, whereas in Europe it's much more skewed, it's much less, and so it's sort of like pushing on a string, assuming that the whole problem is one of commercialization and knowledge transfer. You have not had as much of an active state funding the NIHs and the public laboratories as you've had in the US. What's striking, of course, you see this right away when the Goldman Sachs pigs, Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Greece, and Spain, are striking in terms of the low R&D to GDP, but going really to the detail of the institutions, the R&D institutions in each of those countries is even more striking on how inactive they are. Now, okay, this we all know, but Giovanni, you say this thing about the profitability. I personally think that our community has not provided any very strong sectoral level studies, and I think it would be great to really have this as a mission to show that tax cuts, even R&D tax cuts, have no effect on innovation. In other words, they don't make R&D happen that wouldn't have happened anyway. Okay? So the reason that Pfizer recently left the UK and went to Boston was not because of some R&D tax credits and stuff like that. It was because of the $32 billion of NIH funding, which creates the opportunities that the technological opportunities that our community has written so much about. But we should have today in our pockets studies that we can then bash and show that the tax cuts are wrong, they just create inequality, and show at the sectoral level how there's no evidence that they cause an increase in investment. We don't have that. No.
There is some done
Okay.
not by us, but by other people.
Okay, anyway, the last thing I want to say, and there's many slides on this, so I won't, I'll just say the point, which is that if you accept the role of the state as a lead risk taker, what I call the entrepreneurial stake, in the sense of entrepreneurship being the willingness and ability to take on extreme risk and uncertainty, well, as we know in finance, there's a relationship between risk and return. Why haven't we asked that? And again, Fred Block has also written about this. And also Leonardo, when you talk about the need for the government to retain a golden share of IPR, we really need proper research done, first of all, even inventory done of across the world, what are the mechanisms that one can use in order to reap back that return. Bill Lazanik and I are doing some work, by the way, where we talk about why this is a huge problem, which is that, think of all the insights we have on innovation. Yes, you talked about heterogeneous, but of course it's also, I say cumulative, but Robert tells me I'm saying it wrong. Cumulative. Innovation is cumulative. It's path dependent, which, by the way, means this is why VC, when it does come in late, as it has in every single sector, if the policies are giving it a golden plate and allowing it to do what it wants, it can capture the whole integral under that curve. If innovation wasn't cumulative, or anyway, cumulative, then it wouldn't be able to do that, okay? So this is actually, talking about the characteristics of innovation also help us understand inequality because of the capture. And the capture is not about the usual way we talk about capture, but finance being able to position itself and capture that entire integral. Unless policies are preventing it. But anyway, so by admitting that the state is a lead risk taker, lead entrepreneurial agent, we then have to start asking this thing about returns. As I said, Apple was able to put its headquarters now in Reno, Nevada, pay zero tax. It owes, in theory, if it was paying its proper tax, the state of California, $6 billion. The state of California's deficit is $9 billion, so we're talking big money, but this is legal, yeah? There's all sorts of loopholes. But even, as I said before, even if it was paying that tax, the point is that because taking on that kind of risk, operating in that upper right-hand quadrant will entail all sorts of failures, we need to make sure that we actually have state institutions which are thinking about this, so setting themselves up like DARPA or BNDES, we can talk about it later, how it has actually been able to become the dynamic organization it is and attract the kind of talent it has been able to attract, which many state institutions aren't able to do because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're just going to be a market fixer, it sounds sort of boring. If you're a great undergraduate, you'd prefer to go work for Goldman Sachs than just go there and put Band-Aids here and there. So that there's that organizational level, but also in terms of the return, there's all sorts of things that could be done. Sitra in Finland funded early stage Nokia, or not really early stage because Nokia is extremely old, but anyway, the modern Nokia got its early stage funding from Sitra, just like Apple got its early stage funding from SBIR, but unlike SBIR, which in the Anglo-Saxon world, they fear this, Sitra retained equity and made a lot of money, which then funded the next Nokias. Or income contingent loans, which we have for students, why not for these companies? Google's algorithm, as Fred Block talks about, was funded by National Science Foundation. When Google made the billions it did, should not something have come back to the NSF? NSF today is broke. Oh, I have that much? Oh, I thought I was over. Good. 1 minute. Oh, I can slow down. I have a whole minute. Okay. Anyway, and all sorts of other things. But equity, this, of course, comes to your point today in the taxi about potentially, I've just broken this, potentially having state companies, which, again, obviously will then, that's another way. But state investment banks, I think the really interesting discussion there is they are not just counter-cyclical. Yeah, of course they are. So if you look at the disbursements of BNDES after the crisis, very high. Even the European Investment Bank, before it got worried about its AAA rating, but the KfW after the crisis, that's a very important role. But an equally important role of what, have I completely ruined it?
No, it's
Sorry,
okay. It's okay.
is
It's okay.
precisely funding these uncertain areas. And in so doing, again, BNDES's return on equity, I think it was actually 21%. That then can be taken by the Treasury and redistribute the proceeds from innovation, which is very important from a marketing perspective for the population, but also retaining equity fund the next round. Anyway, I'll stop because I'm over now. But we need creative thinking on what the different types of returns can be, which of course shouldn't then disincentivize the funding, but even just 0.05% of the returns from the internet could have been funding today green tech, and they're not there. And so green tech is not getting enough money.
Okay. Thank you, Mariana. And now we come to the comments from the table. Who will be the first?
Yeah, Giovanni, would you?
Benjamin Correa?
Okay. Thanks very much for this invitation, and thanks to the two speakers. I have two different comments on Giovanni's statement on one side and on Mariana on the other. About Giovanni, I share with him the importance of methodology and theory. I think it's absolutely crucial to work with the right tools. Otherwise, even for empirical work, it never works. And it happens that I am an insider of the methodology Giovanni has exposed to some extent. But to some extent, I have my doubts. And because I think important to at least discuss, if we don't agree immediately, certain points on methodology, especially for the study of innovation, I would like to focus on 2 points of Giovanni's statement. Fica tranquille, Giovanni. I will not speak of the fact that in the evolutionary theory there is no workers, no wages, no institutional investors, no distribution of revenue.
I said it. I said it.
Okay, but so slowly. Okay, I will come back on other issues, new ones, okay, to continue the discussion. I will focus on 2 points on your presentation today, apart from the ones I cited very quickly, but that are, to my view, very important. A theory without workers is a complicated theory, to my view. First one is heterogeneity of the agents. First of all, this is a very strong point of the evolutionary theory, because it puts an end to the vision of representative agents, and it's very fruitful and very important contributions. But we have to do some step more in that direction. Heterogeneity is not sufficient, because on one side, yes, we have heterogeneity, and I agree, and I insist this is a contribution as such. But we have to observe that in different periods, we have dominant forms and dominant actors. So to mention heterogeneity is not sufficient. Imagine what would have been economic theory of the firm without the contributions of Chandler, for example, and the theory of the M form, of the modern form of the enterprise. Many of the things you are saying, we are saying about firm capabilities and so on are possible just because we were able, with Chandler, to locate a dominant form organized around the M form theory. So heterogeneity is important, but is not sufficient. We need to be able, in a given stage of the economy, to locate the dominant form. The same for dominant actors. How can you speak of modern capitalism without noting the role of institutional investor, for example? That was not a crucial role 40 years ago. In Keynes' time, certainly not. And this has completely changed the figure and the dynamics, dynamic first, you say, of capitalism. So heterogeneity, yes, but more than heterogeneity, be able to distinguish dominant forms, dominant actors at different moments. Second point on methodology. You insist on the idea that economy is based on emergent properties. To a certain extent, I agree, no doubt. But to push this idea to the end, the way you do it in your presentation and the way it's done in the evolutionary methodology has, okay, I'll be frank, you know me, has some Hayekian flavor that I detest, okay? I really detest. Why? Because in many circumstances and for many empirical case studies, you can understand what is happening not by using the methodology of emerging properties, self-organized, but by looking to the visible hand of states, institutions, and the way they have designed the behaviors of the agent. Many of us know something about Korea. Okay. Could you understand something of the Korean process of accumulation if you don't have in mind what were the trouble in the beginning, how the state, through the public banks, have funded them, how they were forced to enter into a quasi-Stalinist planification, and so on. So, give me the institution, I give you the behaviors, and not the contrary. Not the contrary. In many cases. I'm not saying that emergent properties do not exist. Yes, but many times, they express themselves through very visible and strong institution, humanly designed, and you can miss that. This is my second point. To finish, just to say that, as you know, I share much of the methodology, but my critique is that the school, the evolutionary school, is doing, let's say, it's a very provocative to phrase it, too much of the same. That is to say, start with a micro foundation, then behaviors, then aggregates as emerging properties, is exactly the methodology of the neoclassical theory. What is different is that your hypothesis on what are the different levels are different, okay? And in a way, more realistic. But it's too much of the same, and to phrase it in another way, the role of institutions are, to my view, greatly underestimated. But this is new. This is the old discussion we have, and I thank all the public for the opportunity to continue this discussion. Let me come now to Mariana's statement. I am a little bit embarrassed with Mariana's statement because I share quite everything. And especially I share the central message, which is the task of the day is not to fix market, is to create new markets. And I share the second thesis implicit in that, which is that to create new markets, the visible hand of the state is a key instrument. It's not the only one, huh? Let's be serious, but it's a key instrument. So, I share your view. Something like 100%. Let me phrase it in different ways and maybe add some few things. First of all, why the question is not fixing market, but creating market, more than ever. Because I really think that, okay, this is a point to be discussed, but it's a strong, if it is true, it's a very strong point. That the accumulation regime we lived with is completely exhausted. So to speak, the Fordist regime, the regime based on mass production and mass consumption through agreements, through wages, between wages and productivity and so on, is absolutely exhausted. And it is dying because of its success. That is to say, the way the model has spread first in countries like Brazil, Mexico and so on, and now to China, means the end of the model. Because the planet cannot just provide the resources for that. It's impossible, okay? If you just, make a projection in 20, 30 years, everything explodes. It's just unsustainable, physically unsustainable. There are other reasons. There are more linked to the economic dynamic and the role taken by finance in the last period that has complicated the whole story. But only for that, the model is exhausted. So the question is, more than ever, not fix the existing market or evaluate along the existing market, but evaluating through along the existing market, because this is an obligation. No way. We have to continue. Find a way for breakthroughs, for radical innovation. And this is a new task. This is a task that happens every 2 centuries, you know. You start from an existing model, existing market, and you know that you have to pass to very different ones, And what are the institutions for that? What are these are the questions that are posed. Let's say 2 or 3 things more about that. Of course, nobody knows the future. The question is to invent the future. But what we know is the future has to be organized around new things, new cities, that's absolutely clear. Less consuming in energy, carbon, and so on. Intelligent cities as regard transports and so on. The future has to be organized around a new function of mobility. The idea of any individual with his car is absurd in a projection. But we need the function of mobility. We need go from one place to another, and we have to invent services to do that, economizing energy and individual transport. What about food? What about food? It's becoming a crucial question, not only for the question of the quantity of food for the planet, but the quality too. In different countries, even now in the most developed, we have scandal about the food. We had a discussion yesterday. Once you process the food, it becomes an industrial product with a series of risks and problems. And no one, and certainly not the Chinese, will deny that. This is a very serious problem for the future. And what about leisure? And what about retirement? Especially in our the developing societies. We have to invent new ways of living. So, create the new market is, with this example, a very, very complicated and heavy task. And we need to do that. Otherwise, we are going directly against the wall. This is absolutely clear. So the question is, I'm sorry, my friend Giovanni, we cannot let emerge the solution. They will not emerge. They will not emerge.
I didn't say that.
Yeah. No, you have not said that. I push the button since I have the floor. Okay, so the ministry, the German Ministry of Energy said recently, we need an Airbus for solar energy. What he means? He means a complicated partnership at very large scale with different enterprises, specialized suppliers, and so on. Okay, to face the question of the carbon economy. He is absolutely right. He's wrong in 2 points. We don't need one Airbus for energy, for solar energies. We need 100 Airbuses for different kind of product services of the future. First error. The second is that what was possible in the past, because we had a public sector on banking in Europe, because we had some strong industrial public companies that could assume the risk with the support of the state. And the help, of course, of private companies. I'm not saying this is a pure public stuff, certainly not. But without a public component, you can't afford. You can't afford. We don't have that. Because neoliberalism has put an end to the public sectors, at least in our countries. So, what kind of incentives will you find to decide shareholders to lose money during 20 years, expecting that after they will win something. You are just dreaming. So we are in serious difficulties. Okay, I do not continue. Just to say that we need new institutions, new visions, and new actors. And this is not easy to find. Thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin. Now, let me ask Professor Sheng Ling. 15 minutes, okay?
May I have
At
the
most.
remote controller?
Very embarrassed that I broke it. And we
Okay, it's fine. It's,
the battery.
battery.
Do you see a battery? It fell out. It's impossible.
oh, thank you.
The battery fell out and I think I ate it.
Okay, it doesn't matter. So this friends can help.
Sit there and just go.
No, they can. They can do it. Yeah,
okay.
just sit down.
Help us. Sylvia's size from
Okay. So actually, it's my great pleasure to be here to be with such a distinguished and well-established group, and I am kind of a newcomer, just like China in the in the international market. So, I maybe
Invisible
first I
newcomer.
introduce myself first. I'm I'm associate professor in School of Public Policy and Management in Tsinghua University in Beijing. So I basically also research on science technology policy, but more focused on the policy process, which more related about the government and industries, how they work together and how they make industry policies work. So let me quickly go to the comments. So my comments will go to Mariana first, then go to Dulcie, and finally I will provide the sort of general ideas about the topic for this session. So I think Mariana, just give us a very interesting presentation, and it contained tremendous contributions. So I do like it very much, and also I try to bring up some observations about China, and because China is no matter or we call it an entrepreneurial country, state, or developmental state, or authoritarian state, but it did raise a lot of policies you mentioned as as an entrepreneurial state. So in our country, that the government rules, they do invest a lot of risky projects, and not only the new emerging industries, but we have long histories on industrial policy, where when the governments or the officials, they select the specific sectors, or select projects, and even they select the certain people to to conduct those kind of risky projects. And especially in recent decades, the Chinese government, input huge money in sort of new, we call strategic emerging industries. But however, those decision makers in the government, they do not take on risk. I mean, they might not really care about the returns. Thank you. The returns on those projects, and it's basically because the payoff is kind of asymmetric payoffs. If they did those projects very successful, they will got benefit from promotion. But if they just got if they failed, it doesn't matter. No one will blame them, and even no one will ask them to to be responsible for those kind of failure. So basically, the cost will be paid by the whole society. So this will stimulate like R&D and the new venture creations, but with serious moral hazard. and tendencies to exceed costs. So we already seen in China like the investment on like solar energy and sectors or wind power sector, and also the new electric vehicle sectors have kind of over investment. But we will see if it's good, that if our government, be very patient to save them, to put more money in those sectors. Right now we cannot answer this question, but we can see. So the second issue I want to raise for your attention is like in those in China, we are lack of a failure mechanism or give up mechanism when you also talk about some cases in the Obama administration, like the Department of Energy, they put a lot of money on like A123, which is a very advanced battery manufacturing for EV, for electric cars, and also the other one you mentioned, the Solonges, which is a solar panel company. But they do have a failure mechanism. They stop to pay more. And for me, for Chinese government, we saw it very unusual, because in China the decision was made by the central government and then implemented by the local governments, and the money come from the state-owned banks. So when this project got failed, in the market, so the officials they would see it's kind of unacceptable question. So what they really concern is not the benefit or the cost. They thought the social efforts, like thousands of workers lose job, and they might go ask salaries not for from the firms. They will just go to the local government to ask for repay. So that's kind of acceptable, questions in China. So the local governments, they have to rescue all those failed companies. And here's examples like Suntec, which is a frankly cited and quoted sample as a very, very successful solar panel innovators and manufacturers in China. And in the very beginning, actually, they are supported by local government. But now, as we know, last year and the year before last, the solar panel international market shrinked dramatically. So those industry actually cannot survive, cannot support such bigger supplier. So Suntec and also the other one, LDK Solar, which located also in Jiangxi province in China, they lose money, and a lot of money. So the local governments have to input more money, and then they aside, but not directly. Usually, because right now in China we think the market mechanism is good. So the local government will see. They will request the state-owned companies, which have close relations with them, ask those state-owned companies to save them, to invest in them. Then after that, after those companies can get money, get survived, then the central government, actually the China Development Bank, they put more money on that. So those kind, but the other issue is Suntec or LDK Solar, they are like a star companies. I mean, they are star company. They are kind of elite in this area. But a lot of others, smaller scale companies, they truly died. So that's, I mean, this is a different story between U.S. and China's failure mechanism, and I think that might be useful for us to think about it. If if it's good that government still be very patient. And the third point is about the broad portfolios of innovation investment mechanisms that, as Mariana mentioned, that there's a whole portfolio or portfolio for innovation. So from very beginning, from the basic research to the applied research to the earlier use stage and the commercialization, that will be have different policy measures to support the innovation to make this new technology be commercialized, be successful. So that's great idea, and also in China, the Chinese government really like this idea, and they do this in last 20, I think, maybe 30 decades. From very beginning, Chinese government believe that the government should pay more attention to the basic research. So a lot of that money goes to universities or research institutions. Then finally, we feel like there's a separate issue that the university always cannot have a well communicated or with the industrial sector. So later, after 2000, after 1990s, so the all R&D funding programs will encourage, or they demand that all the projects, the universities and or research institutions applied should associate with some certain industrial players or some industrial purpose. So to make sure the input, the money used in those universities cannot be just papers or patents or kind of thing which no money returned. So, but even though even those kind of idea came, but the decision maker process or structure still was top down destination of priorities. For example, like thousands of like scientists or engineers or experts were invited to select, to decide which sectors should be invested, which technology should be developed more, and which like nuclear power platform should be be selected to build as a commercial demonstration kind of thing. So this is in some reasons is kind of a very reasonable way to think about the selection process. But the other issue is when the priority set by the top level, the great freedom also given to the decentralized state agencies to use different approaches and instruments. So even in the local level, the local governments were encouraged to try everything, like just subsidize. Also, they can set up like local market and kind of balance or like things, but those portfolio also occurred some other problem that they are not really create a market. They beside the market, they create sort of corruptions, sort of like the inefficient use of public money. So that's the things I want to draw your attention. And but also in China, there are kind of diverse mechanisms for innovation. Sorry. Sorry, it's kind of. So there are a lot of different mechanisms. Maybe I just want to raise up to be a complemental, factors. Like as in China, we have a EV demonstration project, which the central government distribute money to local governments so they can subsidize the buyers. So it's kind of a good idea, because if we just give money to the suppliers, they might misuse of this funding. But how about if we, pay money to the buyers? So it's kind of a good idea. But the result is that the buyers, they basically they are like public transportation companies. They need a big size bus or with battery cars with batteries. So the bus is very expensive, but they don't care, and the quality is not quite good. Was not good. So for the local government, they try to expand the whole package. So they encourage those public transportation companies to spend more. And the other result is there are kind of some very innovative small companies, but during those process they lose the potential market. Why? Because the local government usually assigned the SOEs, state-owned companies, to be an assembling company. Then those assembling company, they just buy the batteries from the battery company, then also manufacturing cars by themselves. Then
1 more minute, please.
oh my God!
Just one.
So I have to go.
Just to conclude. Okay.
Conclude. Okay. So I mean, basically, is the money was efficient use, and also the Chinese government play the role of angel investors, and a lot of science park and incubators were built in China, and public technology platforms, which we saw a lot of good things occurred, but also not all of them are good. So my conclusions is like, yes, an entrepreneurial state is China is an entrepreneurial state, but however, in order to ensure the policies are effective and reasonably cost efficient, we still need to improve the decision-making structure, and one is measured by Mariana, which was decentralized decision-making agencies, and there is to balance the economic accountability and the political incentives. The last one is we still need like an independent policy evaluation. So I want to go quickly to the comments of to the doses. Is that okay?
The time is over. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
The next round, you please
Uh-huh.
come back to
In the round table, okay? After the coffee break, right?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And now, Dr. Glauco Abix from FINEP, please. 15 minutes. Okay.
15.
Possible, yeah.
Obrigado, professora. Bom dia a todos e a todos. Minha cara Ana Célia, colegas aqui presentes. Vou tentar ser bem pontual. Há um esforço muito grande do governo brasileiro de integrar na estratégia de governo no interior das instituições de Estado, a ideia de que inovação e tecnologia é importante. Pode parecer um debate superado, não é. Engano vocês quem diz que essa é uma questão velha, não é. Pelo menos para o Estado e o governo brasileiro. Desde 2003, que tomou a forma uma política de construir uma nova política industrial com foco na inovação. Ela foi anunciada efetivamente em 2004, chamava-se PITSE, Política Industrial Tecnológica de Comércio Exterior, uma política bastante light para aquela época, tinha poucos instrumentos, não muitos recursos. As instituições estavam dispostas de uma maneira distinta. A FINEP ainda mal trabalhava muito fragilmente, no sentido de agarrar e abraçar a própria inovação. O BNDES começava a engatinhar na época nessa questão, no que se refere à inovação, e os resultados foram mais fracos. Essa política evoluiu ao longo do tempo. Acho que o BNDES aprendeu muito, nós estamos aprendendo bastante na FINEP, e mais importante, eu acho que se espalhou, se disseminou pelo país, na economia, nas empresas, a ideia de que tecnologia deve ser incorporada internamente às empresas, a ideia de inovação tem que estar no DNA das empresas, para que elas consigam se diferenciar sistematicamente, regularmente, e poder atacar o principal problema da economia brasileira, que é a questão da baixa produtividade. Está na raiz da nossa dependência forte das commodities, dos produtos padronizados. Essa é a questão chave para nós. As outras, que muitas vezes os economistas, nada contra, viu, Davi, fica nervoso, muitas vezes realçam, certo, que é a discussão sobre câmbio, sobre juros, são todas, evidentemente, discussões extremamente importantes, mas a questão-chave é como aumentar a produtividade, como aumentar a competitividade da nossa economia, que é a única capaz de gerar emprego de qualidade, gerar renda, e possibilitar que o Brasil ocupe um lugar de destaque no cenário internacional. E melhore, efetivamente, a qualidade de vida da população, certo? Então, acho que esse processo de aprendizado passou por várias fases, não vou retomá-las aqui, várias versões de políticas industriais, um esforço muito forte de concentrar os recursos que nós temos. Há uma abundância, é esquisito falar isso, mas eu vou falar bem claramente, há uma abundância de recursos espalhados pelo país, sem foco, sem orientação, dispersos, abundância de recursos para a ciência, para a tecnologia e para a inovação. Espalhados em diversas instituições que não conseguem conversar, se articular e se colocar de acordo em estruturar uma atuação bem clara e decidida com foco na inovação. Acho que nós estamos caminhando nessa direção, às vezes mais lentamente do que a gente gostaria. Eu não vou me estender sobre esse ponto, senão eu perco o emprego, mas eu passo, então, rapidamente, para dizer o seguinte, para dar um exemplo para vocês, eu cheguei à FINEP em fevereiro de 2011, há 2 anos e pouquinho. O nosso orçamento, ele praticamente multiplicou por 6, nós estamos com um orçamento de quase 8 bilhões de reais, o que significa cerca de 4 bilhões de dólares para investimento, muitas vezes batendo na nossa capacidade de investir, nem tanto ainda na capacidade da demanda, né, mas já nós batemos lá. E nós, juntamente com o banco, com o BNDES, com o Ministério da Ciência e Tecnologia, Ministério do Desenvolvimento, Ministério das Comunicações, houve uma articulação muito grande e o resultado é que a Presidente da República deve anunciar nos próximos dias um plano absolutamente inédito para o Brasil, inédito, com foco na inovação, que no mínimo terá 30 bilhões de reais, ou seja, 15 bilhões de dólares, para um exercício de 2 anos. É o mínimo. As características básicas desse plano, a principal é exatamente conseguir reunir fontes diversas, de origens diversificadas, e tentar estruturar uma condução única, uma condução de governo. A primeira característica do plano, ele tem foco e tem prioridades. Num país como o nosso, muita gente fala isso o tempo todo e a gente faz exatamente o contrário. A gente vai dar foco, a gente vai ter prioridade e nós damos milho para galinha, ou seja, damos 10 para cada um e todo mundo fica contente, todo mundo fica satisfeito, de norte a sul do Brasil. Isso é uma característica muito forte. Mas eu também vou parar aqui, senão vou comprar muito inimigo, certo? Mas é uma característica muito forte que nós temos no Brasil, no país, e que permeia as instituições. É mais fácil governar assim. Ou seja, governar sem fazer escolhas, não sei se o termo governar se ajusta adequadamente. Mas, em todo caso, é um pouco assim que a gente funciona em várias áreas. E na área de ciência e tecnologia também funciona assim. Tá? Então, a ideia toda desse plano é quebrar um pouco com essa trajetória. E eu tenho a impressão que o suporte que a presidenta da República está dando, ela diretamente está coordenando o processo, é fundamental para que a gente consiga dar esse tipo de orientação. Então, veja, primeiro passo, a primeira característica forte é foco nas prioridades de governo. Aqui eu queria levantar, as prioridades são as prioridades básicas com as quais as instituições do Estado trabalham, ou seja, energia, toda a parte de petróleo, gás, as energias alternativas, etanol, mas energia, a parte toda de saúde, que é uma área-chave, toda a discussão de sustentabilidade, que envolve cidades inteligentes, smart grids, toda mobilidade, todo tipo de atividade relacionada à sustentabilidade, Amazônia, TICs, Tecnologia de Informação e Comunicação, e aeroespacial, essas são as áreas de concentração que pegam, evidentemente, de um modo transversal, disciplinas de fronteira, como biotecnologia, nano, optrônica, e aí afora. Então, o foco em prioridades é a chave, mas foi introduzido um elemento, também pode parecer engraçado, mas inérito nos planos de governo, ou seja, a agricultura entrou. Veja você, o Brasil é hoje o segundo maior produtor de alimentos do mundo, tem chances de se transformar nos próximos anos o celeiro do mundo, né? E, no entanto, em todas as versões de política industrial, aliás, o próprio nome diz, ainda não estava bem essa indústria chamada agricultura, certo? Apesar de a gente ter uma indústria forte, a gente ter uma atividade acadêmica forte nessa área, a produção científica é expressiva, mas, essa vez, a própria presidenta foi a responsável por isso e houve uma inclusão de uma quantia razoável de recursos voltadas para inovação e tecnologia na agricultura, o que dá ao plano uma dimensão, mais uma vez, inédita. Há vários ineditismos aí dentro, certo? E também as prioridades, elas atingem, quebrando um pouco uma certa lógica, elas atingem indistintamente pequenas, pequenas, médias e grandes empresas, com instrumentos adequados para elas. A segunda característica é aquilo que se chama integração de instrumentos. Nós, até hoje, e funcionamos um pouco assim, nós, quando eu digo o setor público brasileiro, ele oferece uma série de benefícios ou incentivos para as empresas inovarem, mas o que acontece é que elas têm que ficar acertando um pouco aquilo que a gente oferece, né? Então, elas olham no nosso site, elas olham as nossas publicações e vão dos nossos editais e, de repente, tentam acertar. E a ideia é exatamente inverter o processo e oferecer, ou ter à disposição, um cardápio de instrumentos, de tal forma que cubra todas as necessidades da empresa. Vocês sabem que, no caso da FINEP, como agência de inovação, nós não fazemos uma série de atividades que o BNDES faz, por exemplo. Nós não fazemos modernização, expansão, gestão, exportação, capital de giro. Nós fazemos tecnologia e inovação. Tem um foco muito claro, mas nessa discussão, a gente sempre ofereceu instrumentos separadamente. E o que nós estamos fazendo nesse momento, nesse novo plano, é uma integração de instrumentos, ou seja, integrar crédito, que é crédito subsidiado em condições excepcionais para o Brasil, com subvenção econômica. Ou seja, nós interferimos no processo decisório das empresas, tem a ver um pouco com o paper que foi apresentado pela colega, a ideia da atuação do Estado, interferindo diretamente na ambição das empresas. Ou seja, se você está pedindo crédito, mas deseja ou tem possibilidade de entrar em áreas de maior risco tecnológico, nós oferecemos subvenção econômica para diminuir exatamente o seu risco tecnológico e o seu risco financeiro, e a gente compartilhar riscos de uma maneira diferente. Então nós estamos combinando. O interessante aqui é que, ao atuar integrando instrumentos, porque nós incluímos também os programas cooperativos com universidades e centros de pesquisa, nós trabalhamos com programas. O programa Inova Petro, por exemplo, ou Inova Energia, que será lançado. E o resultado é que nós estamos transformando, pela primeira vez no Brasil, o crédito em crédito competitivo. Como o crédito é subsidiado, bastante, né? Nós estamos trabalhando com juros negativos, por um prazo de 10 anos, com uma carência de até 4 anos, e estamos financiando até 90% de cada projeto, depende do risco, certo? Do risco tecnológico. O que acontece é que o crédito, ao ser selecionado por uma banca comum, geralmente nós, o BNDES, nós temos problemas, evidentemente, de encaminhamento, isso pode tornar mais moroso, e não deveria, mas torna mais moroso o processo, mas há ganhos de qualidade do que pode ser oferecido, porque o crédito competitivo melhora a qualidade dos projetos apresentados. Então, você tem uma oferta, uma demanda de cerca de 14, 15 bilhões para algumas áreas, e essa demanda é reduzida para 3 bilhões, porque você seleciona os melhores projetos, se possibilita fazer um trabalho de fomento junto às empresas para estimulá-las a aumentar a sua ambição tecnológica. Por que exatamente aumentar a ambição tecnológica? Apesar da gente também falar o tempo todo no espírito animal, eu vi que alguém falou também num dos papers, está mais para espírito do que para animal, entende? Porque tá difícil, mas existe, eu imagino que sim. Então a gente percebe, quando há um certo suporte, né, da atuação do Estado, as empresas conseguem reordenar, se reestruturar e avançar. Eu espero que isso mude rapidamente. Acho que é um problema de cultura, décadas de uma economia fechada, décadas de protecionismo. Tem uma série de explicações que a gente poderia dar aqui, não sei se a gente teria consenso sobre isso, mas, em todo caso, o que a gente vê é que a atuação pública é fundamental para melhorar a qualidade, aumentar a ambição e melhorar o nível dos projetos e os resultados do ponto de vista de tecnologia e inovação que a gente está alcançando. O terceiro elemento que caracteriza esse programa é a descentralização. Nós estamos trabalhando com agentes locais para descentralizar crédito e descentralizar a subvenção econômica. E nós estamos... Isso já são editais que estão públicos, eu estou falando de planos, mas vários deles já estão em andamento, certo? E nós vamos entrar, eu acredito, numa era um pouco distinta. Isso é difícil fazer, não é simples. A gente se choca com cultura, com história, com vício, certo? Mas é um problema que a gente tem que atacar e trabalhar. E o terceiro, essa ideia toda da competição por crédito e o esforço para elevar a ambição tecnológica das empresas é chave para nós. Então, se eu pudesse falar o dilema entre fixing or creating, é claro, nós temos todo um eixo na ideia de creating new markets, mas muitas vezes a gente conserta também, certo? A gente repara, a gente trabalha as falhas de mercado, isso existe, isso faz parte da atividade nossa, mas eu acredito que mais importante do que esses dois é você organizar essa atividade econômica. Entende? É você colocar norte, é você colocar bússola. É uma atividade completamente distinta. As empresas brasileiras, os empresários brasileiros estão numa disposição distinta de 10 anos atrás. Eu participei ativamente da primeira política industrial em 2003, 2004, já estou terminando, e você falava em inovação, tecnologia, todo mundo concordava, mas ninguém fazia. A gente era um pouco marciano no debate, né? Hoje você tem movimentos públicos das empresas, de empresários, trabalhando a ideia de inovação. Estamos muito longe de ter ainda um dinamismo grande, mas eu acho que é extremamente importante um programa desse tipo e a orientação efetiva e o posicionamento efetivo do Estado para que a economia possa exatamente aproveitar essa oportunidade. Se a mesa me der mais um minuto, eu concluo. Posso ou não? Então, tem um ponto que eu gostaria de realçar, e talvez valesse a pena, até vi que tem uma mesa específica sobre China, talvez a gente pudesse avançar, mas eu queria levantar o seguinte, eu acredito que existe um elemento subjacente à atuação do Estado, que diz respeito a um certo esgotamento de velhos sistemas e velhas formas de suscitar, estimular e sustentar políticas de inovação. O sistema patentário, por exemplo, é flagrante. No setor farmacêutico, o sistema patentário hoje é um grande empecilho à produção de novas drogas e novos fármacos. Completo. Completo. Mas não é só o sistema patentário, porque o sistema patentário ele tem toda a parte das patentes defensivas, tem uma discussão toda embutida, mas também porque as empresas vão atrás da produção de fronteira. A produção de fronteira é a produção acadêmica, que é baseada na peer review, que é baseado na observação por pares. Ao ser baseado na produção por pares, você vê aonde as empresas grandes colocam os seus recursos. E elas colocam recursos nos lugares em que estão estabelecidos, porque, caso contrário, ninguém financia as análises, ninguém financia as pesquisas, ninguém financia a busca de novas drogas, nem as agências públicas, nem as fundações privadas e também as grandes empresas que trabalham sempre na fronteira. A gente tem um levantamento sobre as proteínas que são analisadas para as novas drogas, é um negócio inacreditável. Elas se concentram em 5, 6 grupos de proteínas e você tem um universo pela frente de proteínas que não são analisadas porque ninguém analisa. E você cria um círculo em que o cachorro morde o rabo morde o cachorro e as coisas giram. Então, eu estou falando do sistema patentário. Em TICs é a mesma coisa, é software. O sistema patentário é um entrave da maneira como ele está estabelecido. Eu não sou contra as patentes, mas ela está sendo utilizada em todas as fases do conhecimento. Ela inibe a geração de inovação. Então, eu estou levantando esses aspectos porque o esgotamento do sistema de inovação que está estabelecido na Europa e nos Estados Unidos, e que nós tentamos copiar aqui, mal, né? Ele, de fato, o esgotamento dele é que abre e está na raiz de oportunidades que são aproveitadas por países como a China, por países como a Coreia, e eu espero que sejam aproveitados por países como o Brasil. Então, esse é um problema. Nós temos uma obrigação de repensar o nosso sistema de inovação. Essa é uma questão de fundo que está colocada. A ideia dos passos e dos agentes, daqueles atores tradicionais que nós temos, e os instrumentos tradicionais que nós temos, não dão conta da realidade. É só viver 10 minutos dentro de uma agência de governo para saber o que você financia, e você fala, bom, mas o que eu estou fazendo isso aqui é uma impotência generalizada. E nós tendemos a pôr a culpa ou nas empresas, ou na universidade, ou no pesquisador, e não olhamos exatamente a maneira como o sistema está organizado, os instrumentos estão colocados, e a maneira como o setor público trabalha com esses dados sem se preocupar em transformá-los. Então, eu queria só deixar essa pequena recomendação, que a gente olhe para um certo esgotamento no sistema, para os sistemas nacionais de inovação que estão estabelecidos, e para os limites que eles têm colocados, a começar do mundo patentário, que dirige grande parte da produção, em especial na área de saúde. Como vocês sabem, cerca de 30% das novas tecnologias estão localizadas na área de saúde, no mundo inteiro. E na área de TICs, se somar os dois, você vai ter aí um universo de 50%, 60% que está amortecido pelo sistema patentário. Eu peguei só um exemplo, e levantar em outras áreas. Tá? Então, eu queria levantar as questões, espero não ter passado o meu tempo, peço desculpas ao professor e a todos vocês. Muito obrigado.
Thank you, Dr. Arbix. And now we come to the last one, last commentator, Leonardo Bulamaki, please. 15 minutes.
Thank you. I've framed my comments by looking at the presentations, but also at the general introduction to the program. And also I framed them in the spirit of building a school of advanced studies, which means to me that here is the place where we should be bold and we should be really facing the challenges and raising the big teams. So let me just refresh our memory by reading very quickly from the program introduction to this session, which reads like, the notion that catching up processes at the national level are a guarantee, and the inevitable path to the development of emerging countries must be revised. And then I jump below, it reads like, some new questions must be asked. What are the legal traps for knowledge diffusion hidden in international treaties and agreements? What is, after all, a technological frontier? And who defines it and how? And in that realm, the nexus between law and economics and the nature of technological competition, et cetera, those are all issues which should be at the center of the debate. So I am going to touch in some of this very quickly, and I'll make one comment which will go to both presentations, okay? So first thing, legal traps for knowledge decision. I think that on that front, a school of advanced studies, which also wants to have a policy impact, should confront the task of looking at markets and other institutions also from a legal perspective. And well, legal traps, by legal traps, I obviously mean the provisions in trade agreements, exclusionary intellectual property regimes, which were just referred by Dr. Arbix, patent office practices, and even organized lobbying, okay? So let me suggest in that realm that a useful way to start that task, it would be to recover and develop. Well, actually, we would have to go back to Max Weber and to the German Historical School and to the US institutionalism, who gave us books like The Legal Foundations of Capitalism by Commons, and nobody reads that stuff anymore, or never read. But let me get to something much recent, which is Silos Labini, Polanyian, somewhat Polanyian statement in his Frederico Café lectures, which were reissued in 2010, which reads like, the market, before appearing as an economic phenomenon, presents itself as a legal framework. I think this is a very important statement, because if we go that road, then law must become a building block of any subsequent analysis, economic analysis of markets, okay? Furthermore, if we go that road, as the core source of law, as the major law enforcer, and as a major provider of legal innovations such as incentives, standard settings, and all kinds of rules and regulations for business practices, then the state turns out to be the key market maker and market shaper in a capitalist economy, as well as, of course, an entrepreneur. Okay, this is a way that I think is a useful way to start doing this. Our recent book, some of us have contributed to a book on knowledge governance. I think our recent book, and also I venture to say Mariana's presentation, we tried to go that road. But the reality is that we are still very much in the surface. So from the perspective of the school, I would suggest that a key theme to be explored would be the links in between law, technology, and innovation policy. A footnote here, another key theme would be law and finance. And this is already being done by Katarina Pistor at Columbia. She's funded by INET and would be a great addition to that group. We can obviously invite her and she would be willing to come, and she's already doing this in the field of law and finance. Second point I want to touch. knowledge, competition, and technology, and the technological frontier. Okay, I think we use the term technological frontier all the time, but I think that there is a question here. What does this exactly does this mean? Because the common answer is that it refers to a cluster of technologies and best practices by developed nations and corporations that developing countries should struggle to imitate, to converge to, or to catch up with. I think we can say that there is such a thing as a scientific frontier. A technological frontier should be, I think, much more complicated, especially if one takes technology as meaning not only hard science, but also the social technologies that are very, very diverse. And they are as diverse as the institutional landscape is. So, in that sense, my comment here is that both convergence and catch up are, from an evolutionary or a Schumpeterian perspective, they are theoretically inadequate concepts as they frame development narratives in a way similarly to the Rostovian, coming from Rostov, idea of linear paths towards some kind of development equilibrium, or better, equilibrium imposed on history. If this reflection makes sense to you, as it certainly does to me, the implication for this is that development theory needs an alternative framework to conceptualize the continuous structural change and creative destruction that we witness empirically. In the Schumpeterian domain, the concrete suggestion that I have here and that I'm working on is to develop the concept of leapfrogging instead of catching up as an expected result of Schumpeterian competition. And note that successful innovative enterprises and states, they don't catch up, they leapfrog. Look at Google, look at Facebook, Instagram, Amazon, Apple, Zipcar, Huawei, or less recently, Toyota, AT&T. They didn't catch up with anything, they leapfrogged. Countries also leapfrogged. Britain leapfrogged the rest of the world with the Industrial Revolution. Then Germany leapfrogged Britain. Then the US leapfrogged both. Then Japan leapfrogged Europe. And China is doing it in a much, much larger scale nowadays. So I think that this would be another key theme for the school. And then I get to the comment on the presentations. Evolutionary theory and the role of the state. Here, I want to point to an interesting mismatch in the two presentations. In Mariana's talk, the state is at the center and empirical analysis dominates. The theory runs very much in the background. Giovanni's presentation is a cluster of theoretical propositions conceived as the building blocks, while the state doesn't show up. So an optimist reading of the two presentations together would say that, well, that's precisely the beauty of it. One presentation complements the other by providing what the other is missing. I'm afraid that that's not the interpretation I'm going to be floating here, okay? The way I see it, Mariana's presentation is certainly in the right track in the sense that it deals with lots of relevant data. It provides sharp analytical propositions and there's clearly a quest for theoretical background. But the still missing link is, in my view, is how to root the state into the core of evolutionary analysis. But let me suggest that the problem may be a bit deeper, which means that there is little room in evolutionary theory, at least the way Giovanni shapes its building blocks, for the state. In other words, the state is not seen as organic and a crucial dimension of the evolutionary process, is largely an exogenous element. So let me frame this as a question. How do we reconcile the state-institutional embeddedness of innovation, which is core to Mariana, with the aggregate phenomena as emergent properties, which is core to Giovanni? I think that this is a fair question to ask. And my suggestion here is that perhaps developing Labini's statement that I referred before might help here. And even better, if we do that and link it with Schumpeter's historical chapters in business cycles, we could begin to really talk about at least 4 dimensions of the role of the state from an evolutionary perspective. The first one would be market making and market shaping. The second one would be entrepreneurial activity by the state, as Mariana so beautifully underlined, but also entrepreneurial stimuli and investment coordination. The third aspect would be creative destruction management, because creative destruction is a messy process and it needs to be managed. And the fourth one would be institutional building and institutional breeding. And just make another footnote very quickly. If you want to hear about the state as entrepreneur, really go to the historical chapters of business cycles. You can read about Schumpeter framing the U.S. Department of Agriculture as an entrepreneur. He also talks a lot about the German state in the 30s as an entrepreneur. So that stuff is there. It got lost. So I suggest that this should be recovered. Lastly, of course, Giovanni said it, but let me underline it again. There is no macro. There is no macro counterpart or macro finance to evolutionary theory so far, which is a major challenge if one wants to go deep into policy implications of any kind. So let me conclude by highlighting what I think are 4 major challenges, which also could become 4 major themes for that school. First one, to incorporate law and the state into the analysis of markets, into the economic analysis of markets. Second one, to rethink convergence and catching up, having Schumpeterian competition and leapfrogging as background. Third, to reconceptualize evolutionary theory in a way that the state gets into the picture since the beginning and as a crucial agent. Fourth, the very, very difficult task of building an analytical bridge in between evolutionary and macro financial processes. The first, driven by competition and shaped by laws and public policy. And the second, driven by uncertainty, liquidity preference, financial innovations, and the unstable relationship between debt structures and cash flow. Obviously, the Minsky tradition, and especially several essays by Hyman Minsky himself after 1986 would help very much here. Thank you very much.
Now, I think it's no. No, I think it's fair to give to both speakers 5 minutes to react to the comments. Okay. 30 seconds. Right.
30 seconds.
Or after I think people are very tired.
Yeah, after coffee break, I think it would be better.
Okay, if you want.
Yeah.
So let's break for coffee for 15 minutes, please. 15 minutes.
I looked at people's faces.
50 minutes.
Sorry. I'm not very diplomatic.
No. You are Italian. Uma última pergunta. Aquela expectativa de fazer uma síntese, é feita ao final da sessão. Não procura fazer uma síntese. Eu vou dizer que é impossível e vou estimular a pesquisa. Tá bom assim? Ok. Hello? Back to your seats, please. let's start from the point we close. And I'll ask Giovanni Dozzi and Mariana Mazzucato to react to the comments. 5 minutes at most.
At least. Well, this has been a very rich but somewhat difficult conversation because it went on both one side at the level of the theory and the other side on the level of, say, policy, heuristics, and, say, comparative institutional discussion in a way. Let me make remarks a bit on both. One of the major objections that I received here in this presentation, what I see as the building blocks of an emerging evolutionary institutionalist research program, is that there is very little institution. There is very little institution in the presentation that I made, not in the research program. I think that the overall research program, on the contrary, put at the center the fact that the economic processes and processes of technological search are institutionally embedded, and well acknowledges that one of the major actors is certainly among other institutions, is the state that to some extent shapes the lower level institution like markets, and the comments on law and markets by Leonardo were precisely on the point. If there was a neglect in my presentation, is due to the fact that this presentation is, when I wrote also the paper, and the presentation itself is a bit biased in the direction of formal modeling, not because I think that formal modeling is the only way of theorizing, but because I think that one wins or loses the battle if one also does formal modeling. Because formal modeling is a way of achieving some sort of concise representation of the entities or of the processes that one wants to account for, and allows to make also thought experiment. If I increase this, what happens? And especially in a non-linear complex world like the one that we want to describe, it's very difficult to make this experiment in the mind or in the narrative. I'm fully aware that there are many things that you cannot and you should not model. I mean, when I was a director of research at IASA in Vienna, there was an Italian engineer that wanted to formalize Petrarch's poems. No, you don't want to formalize Petrarch's poems. So a lot of narratives about institution in general and the state in particular, I don't think that you can formalize them. Still, you have got to be able to have models that take into account the actual embeddedness of behavior. Are we there? Not yet. We have interesting narratives on institution and the state, but we are not there yet, and this is a major challenge ahead in, say, linking the formalization that relates to evolutionary modeling to, for example, the more institutionalist stream of analysis à la École de la Régulation, for example. Variety of capitalism. Well, there are formalization of variety of capitalism that don't excite me too much, but macro to micro versus emergence. Now, it's a delicate issue. Of course, I have got a lot of sympathy, and it's straightforwardly consistent with what I said, that macro institutions, say the state, shape what people do, shape the distribution of capabilities, shape incentives, shape... still, when you say, how do I account for the time series of the GDP? That is an emergent property. The time series of GDP is an emergent property coming out of many actors doing what they do, and the growth and fluctuation is emergent. So I think that it is true that there are gaps, a lot of gaps in formalization, but there is quite a natural consistency between the institutionalist reflection and the evolutionary theorizing. Is there macroeconomics in revolutionary theorizing? Now, yes. Now we have a macro. I mean, I invite all of you to read the 2 papers on the Journal of Economic Dynamics and Control by myself and colleagues. One called, the title says it all, Schumpeter meeting Keynes, 2010, and the other one just coming out also with some finance inside. There is an emerging macro. The macro is still deficient on the more Minskian issue of the transmission between... There is finance, but it's rudimentary. It's still rudimentary. It's modeled finance. But, for example, it's rudimentary in transmission mechanism. I think the type of models that you see there, you will see that an evolutionary real side is consistent with a Minskian financial side. But there is a lot of work to do, but I think it's promising. Scattered comment and I finish. Well, catching up and leapfrogging. I disagree that one should substitute the other. You have catching up and you have leapfrogging. Some leapfrogging is rarer than catching up. In any case, catching up is not catching up to an object, but is catching up to a moving frontier. I mean, if one trusts that there are technological trajectories along which technical progress, then a major activity that, was characterized Japan before, Korea, China, is indeed catching up. Some succeeded in leapfrogging. Some did not. The continental European, with the exception of France and even more so Germany, caught up but did not leapfrog the frontier. So I think we need to keep both notions. On the role of the state as innovator, I appreciated very much the Finepi presentation, and I think that this illustrates a major part, an important part of what the state should do. There is another part that was emphasized more by Marianna, that is the state should take up missions. Missions are different from prioritizing, because missions are, I want to go to the moon. And no matter how much it costs, we are not talking about markets. We are talking about going to the moon. I want to have a missile that hits the Soviet Union. I don't care about the cost. I want to get to these technical objectives. And then this had an enormous fallout, but the objective was not the fallout. The objective was, for example, say, in a more civil-oriented missions, we want the sequestration of CO2. How do we do it? I mean, but the objective is that, no matter how much it costs. Huge environment-friendly and health-friendly projects, no matter what they cost. We want to achieve the objective. And this, I think, is parallel to the prioritization of research, which is yet a major advance vis-à-vis a state that says, come to me, if you need money to do research, I will give it to you, on whatever you propose to do, which generally is something that private firms should do in any case. And as Mariana was saying, there is little evidence of the fact that there is a marginal addition of the state money vis-à-vis what the firm would have done in any case. I think that big in order to do this kind of things, big in the agenda, we should say that government spending and also government direct intervention in the economy is not bad, is not evil, on the contrary. And in order to finance that, taxation is not evil, on the contrary, is a good thing, especially if taxation is progressive, and especially if taxation hits the sort of malignant cancer that Mariana was talking about, because that is finance, because finance is not only increasing its nominal size in terms of assets, is also eating out the real part of the economy. In Marxian terms, eating out the surplus produced by the real side of the economy. And this is something that, I mean, none of the beautiful things that we heard around this table today on innovation, financing, etc., will be able to continue on a massive scale if we don't tackle the issue of the financialization of the economy.
Mariana, please.
Let me just start with something that Giovanni said, because I sort of have a problem, Giovanni, with how you began. I like how you finished. But the problem I have of how you began is I feel like it always comes down to this false contrast between models and models that are more quantitative versus somehow models that are more empirical and qualitative. That's not the problem, as you know yourself, when we were and still are often accused, because my other schizophrenic side does what you do. No, I mean the industry dynamics, blah, blah, blah. And we were always accused of being too quantitative by even people like Nelson, sometimes, but also by some other types of heterodox economics. And we said, no, the problem is not too much math. The problem is which math, no? So the fact that we were using replicator dynamics, which were distant from mean dynamics, which took heterogeneity seriously, should be seen by the heterodox community as a positive thing and not susceptible of. But I feel then the same thing, that we should be careful when someone is then critiquing now that the model is too abstract. We shouldn't, especially in this group, just resort to the saying, oh no, but we must abstract, because really what Leonardo, I think, was saying is, what are you abstracting from? Are you actually abstracting from the core? Because remember, Keynes said this too. He said, we have to abstract, of course. An economic model cannot include everything, but the problem with neoclassical economics is it's abstracted from one of the core features of capitalism, which is the persistent tendency to go to unemployment. You do not assume full employment. Schumpeter, same thing. You are abstracting from the essence of capitalism, which is innovation and competition and how competition occurs.
We have both.
Fine.
We have both.
Yeah, but who's...
Innovation and unemployment.
Yeah, but forget your articles and stuff. I'm just saying, in terms of the big challenges ahead, the question here that was raised is you are abstracting from the state. which is the core feature alla Polanyi from day one, not just in terms of innovation. You know, Polanyi's core point was we've always had local markets, always had international markets. What's unique to capitalism is the national market, and that was from day one imposed by the state. So even just how you just reacted, which is, yes, okay, the state, we have to do that, it's still keeping it on the margin. So the challenge, and don't say you have it in an article, I don't know where, but I mean, the challenge is how to bring the state to the core of evolutionary theory and not always belittle the attempts to do it as somehow, yes, it's a qualitative empirical policy, blah, 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 but I'm the big, you know, modeler.
If you're able to model it. I mean,
okay, but that's the challenge. But anyway, but okay. Having said that, you know, I think you're wonderful.
we're talking about modeling, not about
but it's condescending to talk about it that way, which I know you, especially having been trained in philosophy and all the other things, don't think that way. So I think.
I mean, I've been writing about the state and the innovation, the state, and it's simply not true. I was talking about our limitation in modeling the state, but not in considering.
Too, for example, I mean, it's, you know, there's all sorts of. But anyway, as a challenge
considering,
to a school of study,
I totally agree with you on the centrality of the state.
Okay. Anyway, one of the ways, and I admit though, with you know, Leonardo, I think what I really liked of your presentation is not just, I mean, your comments is not just that I agreed with them, but also that it does, how do you say, highlight the schizophrenia within at least our community, which is also a subsection of the bigger community. And I'm just not sure sometimes what the connection is. And I think the key connection, though, is that the essence of at least evolutionary economics, which again is a subsection of this broader community, is the study of the coevolution of those mechanisms that create variety, which is persistent. It's not just a transient state towards some sort of equilibrium of representative agents. So persistent variety amongst different actors, yeah, and the selection mechanisms that winnow in on that variety. And I think one then possible way also to make the connection stronger, which you didn't so much highlight, but it really goes under competition, is how these selection mechanisms evolve. And you know, you gave an example, a very good one, but for sure what I've seen through this 3-year project we just finished on finance and innovation is that currently different types of financial markets, how they are structured, penalize the most innovative firms. Yeah, and really understanding how these processes of selection also can be, again, molded by different, you know, the market shaping, market creation policies are not just about creating new markets like nanotech or the green tech of the future, but also shaping these selection mechanisms in ways that then, you know, the kind of things, anyway. But to do that, I also think you need, and it's interesting it wasn't in one of your 4 points, a theory of value. I just don't know how much longer we can go on within at least the Schumpeterian community, you know, when we meet with people like Steve Klepper and Wes Cohen and all these people, just assume that everything's fine. We have a fundamentally different theory of value, which, you know, it's almost like Steve Keen's point to Krugman, you know, that in the end you have no theory of finance, and yet you're talking about the financial crisis, and you still think money is just a medium of exchange. We could say almost the same thing, I mean, within this group that we all pretend we're friends, and as soon as you bring it out, we're not friends. So it's all hush-hush. Huh? I mean, you know who I'm talking about. And is it serving us much good to pretend it's not a problem? And by that, I don't mean we need to go necessarily to the labor theory of value or whatever, but, you know.
Uma última pergunta. Aquela expectativa de fazer uma síntese, uma opinião editorial, é feita ao final da sessão. É uma loucura fazer uma síntese disso. Eu vou dizer que é impossível e vou estimular a pesquisa. Tá bom assim? Ok. Hello. Back to your seats, please. Let's start from the point we closed. And I'll ask Giovanni Dozzi and Mariana Mazzucato to react to the comments. 5 minutes at most.
At least. Well, this has been a very rich but somewhat difficult conversation because it went on both one side at the level of the theory and the other side on the level of, say, policy, heuristics, and say comparative institutional discussion in a way. Let me make remarks a bit on both. One of the major objections that I received here in this presentation, what I see as the building blocks of an emerging evolutionary institutionalist research program, is that there is very little institution. There is very little institution in the presentation that I made, not in the research program. I think that the overall research program, on the contrary, put at the center the fact that the economic processes and processes of technological search are institutionally embedded, and well acknowledges that one of the major actors is certainly among other institutions, is the state that to some extent shapes the lower level institution like markets, and the comments on law and markets by Leonardo were precisely on the point. If there was a neglect in my presentation, is due to the fact that this presentation is, when I wrote also the paper, and the presentation itself is a bit biased in the direction of formal modeling, not because I think that formal modeling is the only way of theorizing, but because I think that one wins or loses the battle if one also does formal modeling. Because formal modeling is a way of achieving some sort of concise representation of the entities or of the processes that one wants to account for, and allows to make also thought experiment. If I increase this, what happens? And especially in a non-linear, complex world like the one that we want to describe, it's very difficult to make this experiment in the mind or in the narrative. I'm fully aware that there are many things that you cannot and you should not model. I mean, when I was a director of research at IASE in Vienna, there was an Italian engineer that wanted to formalize Petrarch poems. No, you don't want to formalize Petrarch poems. So a lot of narratives about institution in general and the state in particular, I don't think that you can formalize them. Still, you have got to be able to have models that take into account the actual embeddedness of behavior. Are we there? Not yet. We have interesting narratives on institution and the state, but we are not there yet, and this is a major challenge ahead in, say, linking the formalization that relates to evolutionary modeling to, for example, the more institutionalist stream of analysis à la école de la régulation, for example. Variety of capitalism. Well, there are formalization of variety of capitalism that don't excite me too much, but macro to micro versus emergence. Now, it's a delicate issue. Of course, I have got a lot of sympathy, and it's straightforwardly consistent with what I said, that macro institutions, say the state, shape what people do, shape the distribution of capabilities, shape incentives, shape... Still, when you say, how do I account for the time series of the GDP? That is an emergent property. The time series of GDP is an emergent property coming out of many actors doing what they do, and the growth and fluctuation is emergent. So I think that it is true that there are gaps, a lot of gaps in formalization, but there is quite a natural consistency between the institutionalist reflection and the evolutionary theorizing. Is there macroeconomics in revolutionary theorizing? Now, yes. Now we have a macro. I mean, I invite all of you to read the 2 papers on the Journal of Economic Dynamics and Control by myself and colleagues. One called, the title says it all, Schumpeter Meeting Keynes, 2010, and the other one just coming out also with some finance inside. There is an emerging macro. The macro is still deficient on the more Minskian issue of the transmission between... There is finance, but it's rudimentary. It's still rudimentary. It's model finance. But, for example, it's rudimentary on transmission mechanism. I think the type of models that you see there, you will see that an evolutionary real side is consistent with a Minskian financial side. But there is a lot of work to do, but I think it's promising. Scattered comment and I finish. Well, catching up and leapfrogging. I disagree that one should substitute the other. You have catching up and you have leapfrogging. Some leapfrogging is rarer than catching up. In any case, catching up is not catching up to an object, but is catching up to a moving frontier. I mean, if one trusts that there are technological trajectories along which technical progress, then a major activity that, was characterized Japan before, Korea, China, is indeed catching up. Some succeeded in leapfrogging. Some did not. The continental European, with the exception of France and even more so Germany, caught up but did not leapfrog the frontier. So I think we need to keep both notions. On the role of the state as innovator, I appreciated very much the Finepi presentation, and I think that this illustrates a major part, an important part of what the state should do. There is another part that was emphasized more by Marianne, that is the state should take up missions. Missions are different from prioritizing, because missions are, I want to go to the moon. And no matter how much it costs, we are not talking about markets. We are talking about going to the moon. I want to have a missile that hits the Soviet Union. I don't care about the cost. I want to get to these technical objectives. And then this had an enormous fallout But the objective was not the fallout. The objective was, for example, say in a more civil-oriented missions, we want the sequestration of CO2. How do we do it? I mean, but the objective is that, no matter how much it costs. Huge environment-friendly and health-friendly projects, no matter what they cost. We want to achieve the objective. And this, I think, is parallel to the prioritization of research, which is yet a major advance vis-à-vis a state that says, come to me, if you need money to do research, I will give it to you, on whatever you propose to do, which generally is something that private firms should do in any case. And as Marianne was saying, there is little evidence of the fact that there is a marginal addition of the state money vis-à-vis what the firm would have done in any case. I think that big in order to do this kind of things, big in the agenda, we should say that government spending and also government direct intervention in the economy is not bad, is not evil, on the contrary. And in order to finance that, taxation is not evil, on the contrary, is a good thing, especially if taxation is progressive, and especially if taxation hits the sort of malignant cancer that Marianne was talking about, because that is finance, because finance is not only increasing its nominal size in terms of assets, is also eating out the real part of the economy. In Marxian terms, eating out the surplus produced by the real side of the economy. And this is something that, I mean, none of the beautiful things that we heard around this table today on innovation, financing, etc., will be able to continue on a massive scale if we don't tackle the issue of the financialization of the economy.
Marianne, please.
Let me just start with something that Giovanni said, because I sort of have a problem, Giovanni, with how you began. I like how you finished. But the problem I have of how you began is I feel like it always comes down to this false contrast between models and models that are more quantitative versus somehow models that are more empirical and qualitative. That's not the problem, as you know yourself, when we were and still are often accused, because my other schizophrenic side does what you do. No, I mean the industry dynamics, blah, blah, blah. And we were always accused of being too quantitative by even people like Nelson, sometimes, but also by some other types of heterodox economics. And we said, no, the problem is not too much math. The problem is which math, no? So the fact that we were using replicator dynamics, which were distant from mean dynamics, which took heterogeneity seriously, should be seen by the heterodox community as a positive thing and not susceptible of. But I feel then the same thing, that we should be careful when someone is then critiquing now that the model is too abstract. We shouldn't, especially in this group, just resort to the saying, oh no, but we must abstract, because really what Leonardo, I think, was saying is, what are you abstracting from? Are you actually abstracting from the core? Because remember, Keynes said this too. He said, we have to abstract, of course. An economic model cannot include everything, but the problem with neoclassical economics is it's abstracted from one of the core features of capitalism, which is the persistent tendency to go to unemployment. You do not assume full employment. Schumpeter, same thing. You are abstracting from the essence of capitalism, which is innovation and competition and how competition occurs.
We have both.
Fine.
We have both.
Yeah, but who's...
Innovation and unemployment.
Yeah, but forget your articles and stuff. I'm just saying, in terms of the big challenges ahead, the question here that was raised is you are abstracting from the state. which is the core feature a la Polanyi from day one, not just in terms of innovation. You know, Polanyi's core point was we've always had local markets, always had international markets.
Living in a sinocentric world. Third one, stylized fact that we are dealing with a complex system. Not complex because it's difficult, but complex because there is a very different interaction between agents and aggregate the level that we have moving preference, moving targets of firms and more aggregated force. And last one, as we discussed yesterday, development and funding in a high level, they don't reinforce each other today. There is schizophrenic dialogue between development and funding. Of course, there are instruments, of course, there is banks, of course, there are, but in a macro level, they are not interrelated. So taking into account these four sterilized facts is just to support that we should study, we should put in the agenda research what does he could say level of description. He put here level 2, meso and macro aggregates. But meso and macro aggregates, and this is my main point, we have to understand better the networks that are designed today, and networks from one side can be a level of description, but in other side of the coin, that network is a field to have more theory in the networks with all the externalities, all the complementarity. And so we have networks of knowledge, mainly university. We have network of outsourcing of this. We have networks that are good to test some standards, but we have to know the dynamic of how these networks are designed, who are the center. Some old networks like Nike tennis and like for football, we understand very well. But the networks for innovations, the networks for being a field of interpretation between academic and enterprise, we have to have more theory of networks, not only understand the externalities and the usual description of this. And this is my contribution, a very little contribution to a research field of. It's very difficult to manage the great fields here, management of knowledge and innovation. Of course, there is a great discussion, but we could then take into account another level, meso level maybe, or micro bit above firms. We have network of firms, of networks of exchange knowledge, and so network should be a great point of research agenda of the school.
Okay. Dr. Denis Barbosa, please.
Em primeiro lugar, quero agradecer a Lancélia por ter me emprestado seu lugar, já vou devolver. Eu precisava fazer algumas observações a respeito da postura do nosso colega Gabriel Arbix, da FINEP. Eu preciso esclarecer que eu não sou nenhum economista, e muito menos um economista teórico. Eu sou um advogado. E, perante as discussões de Estado maior que estão se conduzindo aqui, eu sou simplesmente um soldado de trincheira. Mas eu acho que há uma boa perspectiva em relação a isso. Por exemplo, a Mariana acabou de falar do problema da assunção ou da modificação de riscos, né? Como advogado, como soldado de trincheira, me foi dado em 2 vezes elaborar o sistema de incentivos fiscais e inovação nesse país. Em 86, junto com o nosso querido amigo Fábio Herber, e, recentemente, em 2004, com a Lei de Inovação. Nas 2 hipóteses, né, a aplicação imperfeita da análise econômica nos fez simplesmente focar o sistema de incentivos fiscais na minoração do risco. Com que estratégia? Bom, para o empresário brasileiro, é muito mais simples, muito mais protegido e muito mais barato importar tecnologia. Para ele, é racional importar tecnologia. Para o Brasil, não é. Nós precisamos desenvolver. Este é um valor, quer dizer, o valor de ter inovação não é um valor do empresário. Então, o sistema de incentivos fiscais que a gente implantou, quer dizer, planejou e implantou, foi simplesmente, vamos introduzir, através de uma indução fiscal, incentivo para o empresário. Para que é melhor importar tecnologia, desenvolver a tecnologia, diminuindo o risco e aumentando a possível receita. Então, o testemunho aqui é o seguinte: quando você destila a teoria econômica ao momento de fazer a lei, né, ela talvez reduz, se empobrece, mas se concentra. O segundo ponto é a observação do nosso colega Arbix quanto ao mal absurdo das patentes, né? Eu, embora tenha passado 30 anos brigando contra a patente, eu não acho que elas sejam necessariamente um mal, né? Pelo menos, como advogado, seguramente não é, porque das 550 ações de patente que eu conduzo, 93% eu consigo derrubar a patente. Então, para mim, é ótimo. Patente ruim é uma coisa ótima. Mas não é esse o ponto. O ponto é que você pode usar o sistema de patente. E é isso que eu queria trazer na observação do Arbix. Né? A par de todo o sistema de incentivos fiscais com que eu trabalhei, e o sistema de financiamento e subvenção, existia um outro sistema de inovação, de incentivo à inovação do Estado, que eu venho repetindo que é muito mais importante do que a propriedade intelectual para um país como o Brasil, e seguramente muito mais importante que o sistema, pelo menos, de incentivos fiscais, que é a compra pública. Né? O Arbix falou de 30 bilhões que ele tem para incentivar. O Ministério da Saúde, nos próximos 2 anos, tem 30 bilhões para compra pública num programa de parcerias público-privadas. Ou seja, o que o Ministério da Saúde faz? Eu sou assessor jurídico do Ministério da Saúde nesse ponto. O Ministério da Saúde quer comprar alguma coisa. Essa coisa pode ou não ser patenteada. Então, entra o Ministério da Saúde, contrata com os laboratórios estaduais a fornecimento e o desenvolvimento de medicamentos. E esses laboratórios estaduais públicos contratam com empresas produtores genéricos, que a lei não distingue que são nacionais ou não nacionais. Mas o instrumento aí é a empresa vai ter que passar a tecnologia daquela tipo de fabricação para o ente público, de tal forma que o comprador, o ente público o Ministério da Saúde, na próxima licitação possa dizer: eu detenho as fontes de acesso à tecnologia. Então, o acesso à tecnologia não deve ser uma barreira que se traduz em um preço mais elevado. Bom, é lógico que a minha função como advogado em relação a isso é tentar evitar com que isso desbarre na corrupção, no desbando. Eu não posso fazer contra a falta de administração, que eu acho que é o maior problema. Eu não sei que o Benjamin falou sobre o sucesso das parcerias público-privadas, mas o meu maior temor é exatamente a falta de capacidade de administração de um sistema tão complexo como esse. Mas percebam só, 30 bilhões é o mesmo prazo que a FIDEC tem o Ministério da Saúde. O Ministério da Defesa, em 8 anos, tem 650 bilhões de reais para comprar. Bom, em dezembro de 2010, foi modificada a Lei de Licitações do Brasil. Até então, a lei dizia: licitação serve para conseguir o melhor preço para o Estado. A partir de então, a lei de licitação diz: licitações servem para conseguir o melhor preço para o Estado e para desenvolver a tecnologia. Isso, o que significa? Significa que 25% de margem de preço é concedido para aquele que, não obstante as condições de mercado, desenvolve uma tecnologia que o Estado espera desenvolver. Se vocês imaginarem o que é a compra pública, 10% do produto nacional bruto brasileiro é compra pública. 10%. Essa é a capacidade de poder de compra do Estado. Né? Se você põe... É lógico que isso não vai abranger todo tipo de compra, mas se você imaginar 25% de 10%, é 2,5% do GNP dedicado a isso. É um potencial. Né? Evidentemente que é o problema. Por isso é que eu acho que o nosso maior problema não são patentes. Né? Patentes são derrubáveis. Patentes é um instrumento entre muitos de inovação. E um instrumento pelo qual o Estado atua apenas concedendo ao particular o direito de um monopólio privado instrumental. Mas a atenção nossa, provavelmente que está pouco apontada, é que o grande mecanismo, grande tentativa de inovação não está na FINEP, não está no BNDES, mas está na lei de licitações. E o interessante é que tem pouca gente pensando e sendo atenta a isso. A minha função aqui, eu entendo, é chamar a atenção de vocês. É preciso que o Estado maior passe a pensar sobre este problema, que é essa solução que pode ser terrivelmente mal aplicada. Só terminando, quer dizer, de onde saiu isso? Em 1990, a FINEP encomendou um estudo sobre o uso de compras públicas de inovação. Eu entreguei o estudo e foi solenemente arquivado. Já que foi arquivado, pedi licença, publiquei isso como livro 96. E assim vai. Eu, vendo o que os Estados Unidos faz com o Departamento de Defesa, vendo a nossa capacidade de compra no setor de saúde e do de defesa, continuo acreditando, como acreditava em 90, que compra pública é muito mais importante do que propriedade intelectual, embora dê aula de propriedade intelectual na nossa escola. Muito obrigado.
Next, Luiz Martins, FINEP, e Federal University do Rio de Janeiro.
Obrigado. Eu tenho 3 ou 4 pontos rápidos para falar. Primeiro, eu estou muito contente de reconhecer uma coisa que eu já tentei fazer quando eu fui fazer meu doutorado no SPRU, sobre financiamento da inovação, que eu tive como tutor o Freeman, pelo lado schumpeteriano, e o Cardim, aqui no IE, pelo lado pós-keynesiano. Então, não é uma novidade, né? Nós temos muito a contribuir por isso. Talvez porque a gente publique muito em português, essas teorias, esses trabalhos não sejam de conhecimento. Mas no IE e na Unicamp, pelo menos no Brasil, já tem muita gente que já trabalha nisso desde a época da Maria da Conceição Tavares. O professor Poças, o professor Fábio Herber, né, já trabalha essa questão dos ativos, do financiamento, né, toda essa ideia de como você tentar, teoricamente, compor um novo programa de pesquisa. Né? Então, eu acho que isso, para mim, é muito contente, porque eu já trabalho nisso há mais de 20 anos. O segundo ponto, que eu acho importante, é ressaltar aqui, que nós temos que ter uma... Nós estamos falando de Estado aqui, e nós não temos uma teoria do Estado. Ao que parece aqui, nós estamos falando de características do Estado, propriedades do Estado, mas nós aqui não sabemos o que é Estado. Será que serve... Que Estado é esse que está fazendo essas políticas? Para quem ele está fazendo? Se o capitalismo ainda é aquele, como dizia o professor Castro, né, esse Estado é de suma importância. Nós temos um exemplo clássico no Brasil, não é isso? O tão xingado regime de substituição de importações foi levado a cabo pela ditadura militar. Chegou às últimas consequências pela ditadura militar e deu um dinamismo enorme. Que Estado é esse que faz política industrial numa democracia, pode fazer numa ditadura, faz nos Estados Unidos, faz no Brasil? Será que é o mesmo Estado? A globalização acabou com a questão nacional? A China... Leia a entrevista do Deng no livro do Kissinger sobre a China. A política da China é uma política de defesa da China, para evitar que os ocidentais não voltem a fazer o que fizeram no século XIX. Então, nós temos que ter uma reflexão, um programa de reflexão sobre o Estado, se nós estamos falando de economia política. E me parece que esse é um missing point nessa discussão. Essa é a segunda observação. Para evitar que a gente fique falando de características do Estado. Característica do Estado, como dizia Polanyi, não é a essência do Estado. A grande transformação trata da essência do Estado, não das características do Estado. É evidente que você vai falar dos programas de assistência, né? Mas os Estados são Estados para ampliação do seu poder, tanto a nível nacional quanto internacional. E como que a inovação se dá dentro disso? Como é que eu enfrento as multinacionais no Brasil? Não é expulsá-los, eu tenho que levar a cabo que elas são multinacionais. Elas não vão repetir no Brasil o sistema de inovação que elas fazem lá, porque é muito caro. E se todos os meus setores dinâmicos estão nas mãos das multinacionais, eu tenho um problema a ser resolvido, que não é o problema da política dos Estados Unidos, não é o problema da Inglaterra, da Alemanha, do Japão. Essa questão tem que ser colocada. Até para que eu resolva o problema do financiamento. O meu sistema financeiro não é o sistema de Londres nem de Nova York, não é Wall Street nem City. É completamente diferente. Ele é institucionalmente diferente porque a história importa. History matters. E as instituições são criadas pela história, não são criadas pelo modelo dos institucionalistas americanos, que dizem que só o modelo americano serve. Douglas North e outros. Nem pelo custo de transação. Não é essa a questão que está em jogo. Não é a questão de risco moral ou de seleção adversa. Isso é uma bobagem do ponto de vista do financiamento. Eu não vou ter venture capital no Brasil, porque eu não tenho um sistema de ações, um mercado de capitais. O mercado de capitais é dominado pela Petrobras. Se a Petrobras cai, o mercado de capital vai embora no Brasil. Era pelas outras estatais, continua a ser predominantemente definido por algumas empresas, que é medida pela liquidez, não tem nada a ver com o valor das empresas. A OGX tem um preço no nosso mercado de capitais completamente desproporcional ao que ela representa na economia. A Bolsa sobe ontem porque o nosso X vai vender suas ações. Como é que eu vou, como a professora falou, como é que eu vou ver o valor das empresas nesse mercado de capitais? Como é que eu vou ter venture capital no Brasil? Não vou ter, a não ser que seja do Estado. A não ser que o Estado vai criar esse mercado, vai ser o market maker. Para isso eu tenho que ter um mercado secundário, para esses títulos. Se eu não tiver um mercado para esses títulos, eu não tenho liquidez. Voltamos a Keynes. A questão da liquidez no sistema financeiro é decisiva. Senão, não tenho sistema financeiro. E não adianta eu financiar a inovação com colateral de ativo real. Eu não estou financiando máquina e equipamento. Por mais que a Pintec diga que no Brasil 2/3 das inovações vem de máquina e equipamento. Eu não posso pedir do empresário me dar um colateral de máquina e equipamento quando eu estou financiando intangível. Então, tem várias contradições que diz respeito não só a natureza da inovação, como diz respeito a esse Estado, que tipo de Estado é esse, que tipo de financiamento eu vou ter, que tipo de mercados financeiros eu estou criando. Evidentemente, os preços de juros e câmbio influenciam. Eu não tenho estabilidade da moeda no Brasil. Basta ver o câmbio, como é que flutua. Né? Isso, evidentemente, vai na expectativa de valorização da riqueza dos empresários. Ninguém é rico em real. Todo mundo é rico em dólar. Real não é aceito, talvez, no Paraguai, no Uruguai, não é isso? Na Argentina. Por isso nós vamos comprar o Messi. Por isso nós vamos comprar o Messi para a gente ser campeão do mundo em 2016. Não é isso? Então eu acho que esses pontos são fundamentais. A última observação. Eu concordo com o professor.
Qual?
O professor Denis. A questão central é que no Brasil nós estamos começando a perceber agora que o poder de compra do Estado é um elemento fundamental de uma política industrial de inovação. Porém, se a gente não reconhecer que esse Estado não é homogêneo, esse poder de compra tem que ser colocado contra a heterogeneidade das frações de classe que estão no Estado. Provavelmente eles não vão servir para enfrentar a questão das multinacionais. Provavelmente eles vão servir para que a gente continue fazendo genérico. Né? Isso não me interessa. Mas eu tenho que discutir essa questão de que Estado é esse, que política industrial é essa. Senão eu vou continuar com a mesma inserção internacional. Então, de novo, volta à questão nacional, não é isso? O Estado tem um poder nacional e tem um poder internacional. Como é que eu jogo isso para fora? A mesma coisa na agricultura, que tem a cadeia dominada pelas multinacionais que fazem o preço, são os market makers no mercado internacional. Então, acho que, de novo, fechando, professor, esse ponto é fundamental. Nós temos que voltar a uma discussão que a gente tinha nos anos 80 e que deixamos de ter, que é a incorporação do Estado dentro das preocupações da economia política.
10 segundos.
Só explicando uma coisa que faltou e que responde ao colega. No Brasil, nós temos uma coisa chamada licença de dependência, pelo qual quem desenvolve um processo novo para uma patente que já está no mercado pode ter uma licença cruzada. A ideia do sistema de compras, pelo menos do Ministério da Saúde, é de que é possível, através desse desenvolvimento de compra de alternativas, chegar a uma solução, se não de licença obrigatória, de um sistema de negociação de entrada no mercado de genéricos, de empresas genéricas, que passam a ter patente. Muito obrigado.
Não altera nada.
Ana Jaguaribe.
So what, professor?
Okay, let's stop there.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I know there are many speakers. I would just like to make 3 points, taking into consideration the methodology of bringing forth things that could be useful for the school to concentrate on. And my first point has to do with the presentation of Mariana. It was extremely stimulating. I think she produced an analytical framework to take a look at the relationship between the state and innovation. And I would be myself very curious to see how this advances from an analytical framework to some theoretical propositions in the future. In fact, she deals with 2 things that are very interesting. Thank you, Robert. One is the idea, she puts forth 2 concepts to be developed. One is the idea of the state as an entrepreneur in a different context than it was used before, and the state as a mission-oriented. In other words, the state has to do more than to correct failures, market failures, and supply the problems of externalities, but it has to be mission-oriented. So the point here is that she deals with this, and she proposes this very interesting framework, but she talks about 2 instruments, or her analysis is around 2 instruments, which is risk and finance. In fact, and a bit, I think the colleague that preceded me said, there is here a void, to a certain extent, to be dealt with. The state is a social and a political actor. So at some point, you have to define what is the role of the state in all of this. Second, so the state which is a mission-oriented state is a state that does more than to react to needs that are perceived. It's a state that claims an autonomy for itself, which is different. So how are we going to deal with that? Question one. Second, the comments of Professor Goriata I thought were excellent. In fact, his idea is that we are, in fact, living in a sort of a transitional space in which we have a form of accumulation that's coming to an end and a new one that is to be created. If that is the case, and I do believe that this is the case, the issue which is most important or central to this discussion is how we are going to define, once again, public goods. Because in fact, when you're talking about the state, what you're doing is how do you organize the agents, be the state or the market, to deal with the question of public goods? And who are the new agents? What is social and what is public in the new public goods? Now, if that is the second point, we come to a third point, which is the question of catching up, legal, leapfrogging, etc., which is coming down once more and trying to put this discussion in the context of what went on yesterday is how do we define state capabilities and how do we define policy space for these two new problems that we have put in the table. And I believe the intervention of Chen Ling was very to the point on this, contrary to maybe what was perceived, because she was saying, what are the capacities and what are the flaws of the entrepreneurial state? And in here, the situation of emerging economies is very interesting because, in fact, there is an interplay between innovation policy and industrial policy we have not talked about. So, in fact, the catching up and the leapfrogging are two things that sometimes are contradictory. And in China, this is particularly interesting because we're going to have a session on China tomorrow, so I'm not going to talk much more about this. But there are points of juncture in between these two types of activities that sometimes are contradictory. And this is something that we have to address too. And my third and final point is that, in fact, I think we have to not only think again a theory of the state, but we have to redefine again the notion of capabilities. What are we really talking about? What are the policy spaces that we are addressing? And where can we go from there? Thank you.
Professor Chen Ling, just a moment, just to know that we are very late now and there's no time to accept any further description, okay? Chen Ling.
Thank you, thank you. So I'd like to, to finish my comments to Professor Dawson. So I do think the evolutionary theory is very workful and very helpful for us, especially for China. We got big lessons from your theory during the catching up process when when you have a kind of strategy which we call market for technology. Then we do open our market to invite foreign direct investors like car makers. Then we try to by doing reverse engineering to jump to avoid or skip the learning process. But after 10 and 20 years later, we realized that it's impossible for any countries who can just got the technology to by passing the learning process. During this process, we do have real understanding on technology. We do understand how those kind of test technologies embedded in the products. So that's the big lessons we learned from, and we feel like we hope it can be more earlier so we can avoid this big mistake. But right now I encourage this wonderful school to focus on one research is about to use this the evolutionary theory on the policy making process, because right now we are come from different countries, different cultures, and also different disciplines. And sometimes we just borrow, theories or borrow policies from other. sectors. But still, from the view of the evolutionary and theory, we need more concrete, understanding research on those issues. For example, that China borrow the environment impact assessment, mechanism from US, then which is very complicated, very seriously, and so all of the big projects approved by China government should go through this process, the environment impact assessment process. But it turns out that we don't have such kind of governance structure and also those embedded culture to support and also embedded institutional factors to support this policy. So right now we still face serious environmental problems. So I do encourage our wonderful school to to get further deeper research on those process. And also, I hope this research and also the constructive debate could be conducted in a scholarly way. Thank you.
Benjamin. Thank you. Quickly, please.
2 or 3 points, but very shortly. First one, Giovanni. No, you can't say since we cannot formalize the state, then it has not to enter into the theory. This is just impossible.
I did not say that.
Yeah. You said, okay, formalize it. No. This kind of terror is absolutely out of the game, because if it is very, very important, put it in your statement and don't say I can't formalize it. Okay, no, but this is an important point. Huh? This is an important point. Okay, but you can speak about it at least. First, second, to Mariana. Maybe you will be disappointed, but let me tell you that the question is, to my view, of course, is not only the state, by institutions in general. Let me be clear. If you look to the question of the climate change, it's an international question. There is no issue without an international agreement. So it's not a question of the nations, of states. And for many other questions, biodiversity, many of the key questions of the future are depending on new visions and new regulations taken jointly by a series of institutions, and probably not only states. I mean, if big enterprises are not committed in these agreements, nothing will happen. They will continue to play with the market for pollution the way they are doing, and the pollution will continue. They have to be committed seriously. So this was to make that point. It's not only state, but institutions, regulations, rules, and so on. And in that, I come to the point you made. We need a new definition of public good. And I will formulate it in a different way. Public good, of course, they exist. But we need to define what should belong to commons. What are the common things we want to share? And here I turn to my friend, the lawyer on my right. There is something very important in terms of property rights and in terms of debundling from property rights into different types of rights: right of access, right of use, right to sell, right to alienate, and so on, to distribute the right among the partners inside the community, which is another way to define commons, public good, and to avoid, I'm sorry, Mariana, to avoid the opposition private-state. Between private and state is the domain of the commons, that is to say, of communities, of actors, of shareholders, okay, sharing different attributes of property rights. We have to finish with the idea, and this is absolutely key. We have to finish with the idea that property right must be private and exclusive. It never has been so, and more than ever, we need to have a concept of property rights much more flexible. Well, I am working on that issues. There is a series of domains and experiences where between state and market, you have this domain of commons, beginning by scientific commons, knowledge. And this is one of the future we can build if we agree that the past, including the past of the societies built on exclusive private property right, is finished. Because it's the end of this type of society too. We have to be clear on that. Because it is this type of society too that has created Fordism, accumulation, but now the exhaustion of the planet. We need to think differently. Last point is minor point, but not so minor, is on compras publicas. It happens that I worked with the Ministry of Health here in Brazil in the period of the ministry was in charge to buy the active principle for pharmaceuticals. And in that time, you had a lot of money in the hand of the Ministry of Health, but because they were obliged to buy at low cost, they bought everything from China, from India, and they have finished to destroy the national chemical industry. So, compras públicas podem destruir a base nacional. Bon, it's clear that you have to define differently the rules of the call for tender, but certain definition of the rules of the game may contribute to destroy the national industrial basis. So we have to be clever and serious in that. Thank you.
Albert Kaido, Georgetown University.
Thank you very much. I have 4 comments that I think lead to 4 recommendations for programs.
Briefly, please.
Very quick, yeah. The first has to do with the exchange between Mariana and Professor Chun. I'm reminded of my way to try to understand Hayek. I read him and I said there's nothing logical here nor empirical. And it says that he came out of the Austrian Empire. And that's one thing. And so there was all kinds of examples as ahead of the inefficiencies of a government. And I think this is true in China. You come out of a Maoist system or a hugely hierarchical system, and there are all kinds of inefficiencies. And so then you criticize that, and that's the core of your sort of your culture. But that plays right into the hands of those that don't want an effective government. They don't want a government that can be a good government and help promote what the common good is. And so you're kind of stuck. And I think where the trick is in the transition from taking apart or correcting or defanging the bad parts of the hierarchical empire that you've inherited and shifting to the notion of the positive capabilities that government should have and can have, and that could make a government quite large and quite what you might otherwise call intrusive. Instead, it's quite productive and creative. And so there's a transition in terms of how the role of government is seen. And I think a study would be, what are the markers for that transition? What are the purposes and the ways of accomplishing first the defanging and then of building up what a positive government can be? So that's a study of research. I just want to make a quick point that a lot of the discussion here about innovation and leadership is supply side. The exceptions, and I'm very impressed with the role of demand and of good demand management for development success. And so you have the very entrepreneurial role of government as a demand phenomenon, very important. You also have the need to manage the macro demand so that you can have product markets for those that then want to commercialize that part. So there's and you can go all the way, back to Solo. If you think, gee, we really just need more education and so forth to get that disembodied technical change up. No, you often have high growth of disembodied technical change when you have managed demand well for the overall economy. So there's the role of demand in innovation and disembodied technical change that I think really needs a lot of study, and how does that fit into development policies. Third, on these major breakthroughs that I think Benjamin has talked about, these are clearly issues that require leadership and vision, and therefore I think a role or a good study would be, you can't just try to transplant the Chinese state council mechanism and the party's role as it's integrated throughout the whole system to maintain discipline and so forth, but you could study and try to explore what are the components of leadership, particularly in economic policy, that can work for the long run and still have checks and balances. That this is something that how do you configure that? It's taking certain components that we know work for the long run and making sure that they then don't become a deviant or self-serving or abusive. And fourth, the idea of an entrepreneurial state is going to meet enormous resistance from those that don't want to see any government program really come out as successful, because it gives government the panache of being useful, of actually being something that is desirable. And so you will find, just as we hear, as Keynesianism is bad-mouthed, because if Keynesianism somehow could get us out of a recession, that might mean that government could do other things well. And so we need to do something that Mariana mentions and others have. Lavinia, Barra de Castro and I were talking about earlier this week, this discursive point. How do we change the whole language of economics so that we're not talking about, well, we're really in a second best economy that leaves alive the idea of a first best economy. Okay, we don't want to have an idea alive of a fantasy market. Instead, we want to build an edifice of fundamental economics that has popular significance in the whole culture, that tells us what government does, that begins with the idea that that values, prices are not the result of supply and demand. They're the result of inherited historical power relationships and institutions that have subcomponents of incentive systems in them that are worth studying, but that it is in a framework of power. And then you have to say, and the direction we need to modify this congruence of power relationships and institutions has to be based on our values, whether they're religious values, what we consider to be fair, how the degree of empathy in our society, how do we build those into our modification of the power relationships we've inherited, and they involve also rewards to effort and rewards to risk. But it doesn't just say, oh, well, it's supply and demand. Chapter 1 in Principles of Economics, you need to begin with inherited power relationships and then have within those many of these other components. So that would be something worth studying that could have a profound, in my view, contribution to accomplishing the kinds of things we want to do, because we can change the discourse and change the public opinion of the role of government. Thank you.
I can't say your name.
Thank you very much. Please. I'm very grateful because it's late and you gave me the chance. Basically, I want to draw attention to the macro question. I'm sure Giovanni's paper would probably contain this, but nonetheless, I want to draw a conclusion from it. You see, we are talking about Schumpeter. Now, Schumpeter believed that in the capitalist system, there is a tendency towards a full employment equilibrium. So whenever he was talking about innovations, those innovations were basically occurring around a full employment equilibrium. As a matter of fact, we know that that is not the case. We know that there is Keynesian unemployment, which you talked about. That means a deficiency of aggregate demand. We also know that even if there's no deficiency of aggregate demand, there may be unemployment because of inadequacy of the capital stock to employ the available workforce, which is Marxian unemployment, if you like. Now, I think if you have unemployment and if you have problems of aggregate demand, then of course the idea is after the wave of innovations, you would actually end up with a level of, you could end up with a level of employment and output that is lower than existed at the beginning of the wave, before the wave began itself. Traditionally, that has not been the case in capitalist countries, partly because of the fact that, demand problem before the First World War was taken care of by the colonial system upon which capitalism subsisted. And of course, in the post-Second World War period, the so-called Golden Age, it was taken care of by the state. The Marxian unemployment problem was taken care of by massive migrations that took place until the First World War into the temperate regions from Europe and so on. But today, when we are talking about, let's say, developing countries, even middle-income developing countries like India or even China, You see, the point is that even if the problem of aggregate demand is taken care of, the fact remains that innovations can actually lead to a situation where the creative destruction is a destruction of large numbers of small producers, so that in effect you can actually end up with much larger amounts of unemployment at the end of the innovative wave than you were at the beginning. And if that is the case, then it implies that the role of the state must also be not just be entrepreneurial, but the state in some sense also has to choose between innovations. The state, in other words, has to in some sense plan technological progress to ensure that it does not give rise to substantial unemployment. Now, I'm not quite sure whether that role, Leonardo talked about the state making markets and the state managing creative destruction, but I think the management of creative destruction may also take the form of the state actually planning technological change in a far more conscious manner, certainly in overpopulated, large labor surplus economies.
Okay, now the last one. I can't say your name either.
Andrew, I'll try and be brief because I know it's late. But it's actually it was a question for Mariana, but she's not here, so.
Okay, you are the last. Okay.
But nonetheless, anyways, it's just that I was both in I thought it was fantastic, and definitely will become a required reading for my students. But nonetheless, in the whole discussion of the entrepreneurial state, and I think in a lot of the interpretations then in the comments afterwards, there was this understanding of the need for the creation of markets and sort of the entrepreneurial state's role in the creation of markets. And also Mariana was evoking Polanyi quite often in that context. And I just wanted to do sort of put that in perspective, because of course when Polanyi's main point was not so much just about the creation of national markets in commodities, but his more fundamental point, of course, was the creation of markets in land, labor, and capital, and how this leads to a chronic tendency, similar to Marx, to crisis, although for him the source of crisis was more social and political rather than economic. And what I just wanted to, well, unfortunately she's not here, bring Mariana back to that, because what I sensed in her whole discussion was what she was essentially evoking was a type of, the double movement, of course, for Polanyi was then a process of reaction to that, the upheaval, the creative destruction, or the dislocation, as he referred to, in terms of decommodifying that commodification process, but at a higher level, and the welfare state for him was the most advanced process of that, but it was one that was fundamentally full of contradictions and would also potentially break apart. It was probably would have been his diagnosis of neoliberalism had he been lived to see it. So what I'm wondering, and Mariana just missed all of that, but no, that's okay. But the question I would then have is, I sense there was an evocation of a sort of a sense of decommodifying this process of innovation, in a sense of trying to bring back a lot of the benefits of the process of innovation back into the commons, we might say. And yet, underlying that, there's also an underlying process of the intensification of creation of new markets and the extension of the market process. So what I sensed there in a Polanyian sense, because I was just giving a preamble on Polanyi, which was much more about the decommodification of land labor, or the commodification of land labor and money markets, rather than just the creation of national markets and commodities, say, and the fundamental tension in that. And then decommodification, the double movement, is being a response to that, but the one that's fundamentally full of contradictions, and hence the tendency towards crisis, particularly in the social and political realms, not just in the economic realms. And hence, what I sensed in your presentation was a similar type of tension and contradiction, in the sense, on one hand, an evocation of a kind of decommodification of innovation, in a sense, of bringing the benefits back into a sort of common, the common, so to speak, while underlying that also, in the same, sort of as a dialectical part of that process, also pushing for an extension and creation of new markets as part of that strategy. And whether you sense any type of theoretical or empirical tension within that. Yeah.
Oh, the very last one, please.
When it comes at this time of my lecture, my students think about the bowl of spaghetti they are expecting to find outside. And there is no bowl of spaghetti, but there is lunch, a generous one. So I promise I'll be very brief. 2 points. One on about Giovanni. Giovanni, I'm talking about you. Giovanni, though we've known each other many years, we really never discussed one point. Dynamics first and nonlinear dynamics. I'm taking an issue with this because what I'm saying is that what is the dynamics that he's talking about? Let me remind that we started doing dynamics a long time ago in order to represent this equilibrium phenomena that led to discontinuous change. And that was economic change, was a discontinuous phenomenon. It was represented in words by Schumpeter with the idea of the innovation as a bump. And it was tentatively represented in mathematics, modeled by a group of people in England and the United States. One of them, a good friend of both Mario, Giovanni and me. But this program was, this research project was killed because they couldn't do, probably they couldn't do the right mathematics, let's put it this way. So the whole story, the whole area of dynamics has been redefined by Bob Solow in 1956 as the theory of a smooth, continuous process where the only type of economic change that could be incorporated had to be led by a continuous process from outside that we know as a technical progress. Now, as long as we stay with this, within this paradigm, I don't think we are facing really the problem of representing dynamics the way it was thought originally. Now, my point is that from what I see of the building blocks put forward by Giovanni, I think we're still there. I've never seen any evolutionary dynamics, especially modeling, that went beyond this, beyond a continuistic representation with what I consider to be an adulterated notion of economic change, which is at most replicator dynamics. Okay? Replicator dynamics is like any other dynamics. That's why eventually, as Leonardo put it, keep talking about catching up. Catching up is a neoclassical notion. It comes from that kind of dynamics. So that's why, as long as you are within that vision, you end up emphasizing that kind of process. While I totally sympathize with Leonardo Maisfanaves once again, that we should focus on these continuous processes, and his example, leapfrogging, is one such process or such event. It's one in a category. So I sympathize also with Mariana's redefinition, careful redefinition of evolutionary dynamics as not the whole of dynamics. And in fact, my point is that what is missing really in the last list, Giovanni, is exactly this continuity. It's the first item, which is not there. I think the state and the other things which are missing could be fixed. I don't think this can really be fixed. It is the grand challenge of doing dynamics, and I leave it possibly as an area where we can collaborate. The second point I wanted to make very briefly once again about public goods, and I'll say the following, and I'll come back to this point in the afternoon. I have the feeling as a European that in this room there is too much state and market, and nothing in between. But reality is full of things which are in between. The majority of public goods are local public goods. The majority organizations producing public goods are local communities. We have to address the question what to do when we have weak local communities. And in fact, the challenges of the future, of which Benjamin is talking, will be probably mostly solved by strong local communities, cities, villages, and so forth, providing these new type of public goods on a scale which is, etc., and with the capacity of controlling the process and the efficiency of that. There is a large literature on commons referred to by Benjamin. Let's not forget that in June, Elinor Ostrom passed away. She was the one who spent her lifetime on this. And I think this is also another topic which is of importance for Spider, especially, let me say this to conclude, because we Europeans know this, because we have a very strong local communities, and we insist on that, and we have a European Union policy to strengthen them, and I think will be a very interesting platform to compare our experience ongoing with Brazil, with China, with other places. Thank you.
Well, Ana Célia asked me to wrap up. I'm not able to do that. I'm sorry. It's impossible. Not only because of the time, it's too late, but it's also impossible. So I'll just make three very short comments. First one, regarding the two presentations given here. I agree with Leonardo. I think we made a very good synthesis. But I also agree with the position made by Giovanni, in the sense that the state is not really absent in his building blocks. The state is exogenous, as we say in modeling. Exogenous doesn't mean exogenous to the system or to the economy. It's exogenous to the model. And it may be important all the time, still being exogenous, because it's not determined by the variables of the system during the time in which the system runs. Okay, and I'm sure he agrees with that, because we have all historical and institutional and economic reasons to keep the state inside and not outside. Inside the analysis. But not in the modeling, because it's not endogenous. Okay. The second point, totally random points, personal point. Leapfrogging versus catch-up. I think catch-up is very important. I agree again with Giovanni. You are dealing with catching up to a moving target. Not only moving dynamically, moving in structurally, because we're dealing with technological structures and technological trajectories. There is change in this movement with structural change. Okay, and so I would keep the idea of catching up as a major reference, not only for analysis but also for policy. And leads me to the third point. We must have, maybe from here, hopefully, an agenda to link the academy to the state programs, or the agencies like FINEP, for instance. They are doing very important things which we don't really know very much. And we should give some academic support, study and research to this kind of work. And perhaps catching up for a country like Brazil and many others, which are already industrialized, but not enough close to the frontier, the technological frontiers, not only in new technologies, but also in common technologies that are essential to provide competitiveness for the industry. Maybe we should consider catch-up as a mission, like Giovanni defined it also. I think we should give more time and more reflection on this subject. Catch-up as a major objective of policy. Okay, that's my only contribution here. But let me ask Ana Célia, what about starting in the afternoon at 3 p.m., okay? And last comment. People in the panel asked me to thank very much the translators for their excellent job. Thank you. We join again at 3 o'clock.